Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, and I'm excited to be with you on a special Sunday. It's a makeup stream, so it's not actually our third stream of the week, as it normally would be. Thursday, I was having internet problems and was unable to bring you our stream topic, which, of course, was decided on by the patrons of the Knights of Last Call Patreon. You can, of course, join that if you're interested in playing in a series of community games or participating in some of the best RPG conversations that are happening on the internet. Or if you just want to, support the channel and show some love, the Patreon's the best way to do it. You can do that, patreon.com/knightslastcall. Thank you to all of our patrons. And if you're not a patron and you're here and you're hanging out, we'd appreciate you subscribing, liking, maybe leaving a comment. Let us know your thoughts on GMing and GMing skill sets, and what have you struggled with, and what do you think you're actually particularly good at? I think a lot of people beat themselves up about what they're not good at, but they fail to see or at least recognize, hey, but I actually do these things pretty well. So we have a pre-tip before the stream even started. Lollipop Candy tipped us $10 to keep the GM tips coming. So thank you, Lollipop Candy, for that. Great Gold Worm is excited because they are finally catching a live stream. Yeah, I'm going to try to do as time goes on here more early streams. 7 p.m. Eastern for us is normally our time, but if I can do the occasional 5 p.m. or 3 p.m. Or even noon stream to make, we have a lot of people in the EU. We have a lot of people on in sort of Australia, New Zealand. So anytime we can make things a little bit easier for them, or at least try to give them an opportunity to join with us, I think that's fantastic. OE, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're here as well. Played a couple hours each time to only, and Jonathan, that may very well be what would happen to me is I would get on, I'd make a character, I'd run around Dunmarogue or Elwyn Forest and, do a couple quests and, whatever, and then probably log off and never log on again. To chat with your boy. I was never really social in World of Warcraft, to be honest with you. I never joined a guild. I was never big into raiding. I didn't do any of that. I mostly just either played solo content or, I'd play with my friends from real life who were also playing WoW. We'd all get on the same server. So a lot of like two-man, three-man parties. The only time I really ever joined like a full-size party was when we would do like when they introduced Dungeon Finder, and I could just, auto teleport into a dungeon group. But I never found that to be very fulfilling content either. So yeah, it is what it is. Let's see here. Couldn't bring myself to play Miss Pandaria. My wife and me dropped out of... Oh, sorry. I couldn't bring myself to try Miss Pandaria. My wife and me quit shortly after Arthas. Oh, that's fair enough. It was a beginning... It was a weird time for this thing. I just didn't really particularly love it. Exactly. That is actually true. There is no way that I could have ever possibly covered all that. All right. So today we are going to be talking more about our ongoing series on GM skill sets. All right. And we've been talking about this now for a couple of weeks. And, today, maybe it's appropriate or par for the course. But today we're going to be talking about the third element that we identified as being part of the GM skill set. And here we have our skill sets. And we identified 6 main skill areas: communication, okay, which was our first stream; preparation and organization, which is our second stream; our third stream, which is improvisation and adaptation; our fourth topic is adjudication. Our fifth topic is mediation. And our sixth topic is storytelling or directing. So today we've covered communication, we've covered preparation and organization. So today we want to talk about improvisation, adaptation, being able to be, if we had a term, I would call this if this is the prep phase, this is the low prep, no prep phase. How do we get better at that? What are some tools? What are some things that we can work on, tricks that we can establish that allow us to be a little bit more adaptive as game players? And to be fair, as we go down these lists, because it's not like this was originally supposed to just be one stream, but it's not. So it's not like I wrote like I didn't like plan this out really, create like some master outline. So as we go down this list, I think you're going to find that there's going to be overlap, right, between some of these some of these areas. So some of the stuff that we talked about in preparation and organization are also going to be things that kind of bleed into improvisation and adaptation. And it shouldn't really come as a surprise that I feel that, one of the first things that I'll talk about being good at improvising and good at adapting is actually being well prepared and being well organized. And so it might seem a little bit contraindicative, but it is the case that I do feel that way. Let's see here. Oh no, is our chat broken? What is going on with the chat? Oh, it is broken. Okay. All right. There's our chat. There we go. All right, there we go. How to adapt your stream schedule when your internet goes down. That's exactly right. Keeping it loose, keeping it going. And of course, remember, the whole point of you being here is to ask questions and participate and be part of the conversation. So if you do have any comments or questions or things that you want to kind of spend some more time on, let me know and we can figure them out together. So what I thought we would do today is something a little bit different than what we might ordinarily do, which is we're going to talk about improvisation. We're going to talk about adaptation, but I kind of want to give a little bit more of an example than we might ordinarily otherwise do. But let's start off here. So GM skill number 3 is improvisation and adaptation, right? And this essentially is about being able to roll with the punches. And I think that fundamentally, this is a really important skill. It's listed in the second tier, right? The first tier was obviously communication. But I think that this is a really important skill. And I think it's one that a lot of people struggle with because to me, and I've talked about this on many other streams, at the heart of RPGs, right? That is a terrible heart. At the heart of RPGs, that's a slightly not worse heart. At the heart of RPGs is this idea of player agency, right? And it's this idea that we play RPGs instead of video games. And video games are getting better about this just because they're so huge and they're so complex and they've taken so long, right, to write. And the people have really just, figured it all out, so to speak. It's it could feel like you have infinite expanse. And of course, you don't actually in a video game. But in theory, in a tabletop role-playing game, the sky's the limit. And you can go and do things that the game master never expected, that the adventure writer never expected, and do something that is truly unique, right? Truly creative. What up, Tabletop Nerd Josh?
Tabletop Nerd Josh tipped $3. Love the GM tips, but I'm curious to see what you think about Skate Wizards and the Goblin Slayer TRPG.
All right, so Tabletop Nerd Josh, thank you so much. Throwing some support for systems because wants to know about Skate Wizards and the Goblin Slayer RPG. Yeah, I mean, I think for some of these, no offense, Tabletop Nerd Josh, but for some of these smaller press games, I mean, don't get me wrong, we talked about some pretty small press games on here, but those are like micro light, those are like super itch.io, right? It might be a possibility where we do like multiple systems in one stream just to kind of get a bigger bang for our buck and try to just cover a couple different options. I find it probably unlikely that I will ever do a full 2 or 3 hour stream on Skate Wizards. But could I cover it and maybe another game or like another 2 games, 3 games in one? Yeah, like I could see that, and sort of focus on these really small, super hyper niche RPGs, especially if it's a game system that I haven't played before, because then I don't have as much to say. I don't have as much experience. Francois says, not a problem if I repeat it, it is more probable that I integrate it. Fantastic. But yeah, Laughing Out Loud got it right. It's one of the hardest skills to develop, but it is what makes the games truly great. And so, I find that being able to adapt to what your players do and not try to force them, because to be fair, like any skill, developing this skill could serve you in one of two ways. Okay, and like the Force, it could be used for good or it could be used for evil. And I mean this in the sense that improvisation and adaptation could mean, okay, that you have an adventure, okay, that's been sort of, written out, and it has a series of encounters that kind of go from the start to the finish. And, your players are going through and, they check the box here and then they check the box here. But then when they get to this third encounter, things do not go as planned. And the group ends up taking a sharp detour because either they chose to do something unexpected, or maybe they failed something that, God forbid, the adventure assumed that they were not supposed to fail it. Regardless, you have found yourself deviating from the established timeline, right? And so there are two ways to think of this. One is to go with this, right? And basically, it's like, if we're putting on our Avengers Endgame, right? It's like when when Supreme, what's her called? The Master of the Mystic Arc, Tilda Swinton's character, Sorcerer Supreme, is showing Bruce Banner, right, that you have created now a new timeline. Okay, where the player's actions have essentially shunt you into this new version of the game that did not exist before. And while there may be some tenuous or loose links between what you had originally planned out and what is happening now, it could be possible that this is all mostly, new stuff that's just sort of developing, right? So one way that you could use these improvisation and adaptation skills is that when the players don't, quote unquote, do the thing that they're supposed to do. And that, by the way, that sounds very, controlling. But like I said during the preparation video, even I go into a session with at least some rough idea of what I think the players are trying to accomplish or what their goal may be. I mean, it may just be nothing more than what they said, or maybe I know, hey, this session, the Goblin War boss is going to attack the town, and I assume the party is probably going to want to fight them and save the town, but you don't know. I mean, that is where I make plans, but then I hold on loosely, right? And I'm allowing the story to develop. So one way that you could work on your improvisation adaptation skills is the group takes a hard detour, and now we're in this new world where we're creating stuff, from nothing. However, there is also the easier, or I'm sorry, I would call it the evil, but you don't. I'm being a little bit facetious there. When the party goes and does this side tangent, okay, you can let them proceed, and go with the flow. That's what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to be adaptive. But you could also use your skills of adaptation to figure out a way within the context of the fiction and of the events to get them back on the so-called correct path, right? So you could come in like the TVA, right, and eliminate the incorrect timeline. And it may well be that, you have to improv, you do have to end up creating a new scene. But then that scene is just, that is a scene that's a bridge to get you back to here. And that way the party can get to the boss or whatever the big MacGuffin is at the end of the thing. And in this way, I'm not going to poo-poo this too much because I get it. I mean, I use modules all the time. I use prep. I mean, I like it when other people do stuff for me, and I don't want to completely throw that away. I've read this stuff. I might even think that some of that stuff, especially if I'm playing a game with maps and battle maps and cool fights and lots of complex, that stuff's cool. I want to get a chance to use it. I don't want to shoehorn my players and force them to have to follow a path. But if I can be adaptive and I can gradually, in a very natural way, not in a strong-armed, punching them in the face with it type way, where you just kind of, basically say, no, you can't go that way. You try to go down that road, but then the bridge is out. So you can't go that way. You got to go through the forest. It's like, okay, you're not being adaptive, right? You're not good at improvising. And so what are you doing? You are just completely eliminating any world in which, they could ever come down to this world, to this lower area. All right. Or similarly, maybe the reason why this happened is because an encounter didn't go, quote unquote, the way it's supposed to go. Well, how are encounters supposed to go? Well, we all know the answer to that. The players win. I mean, I don't think you're stupid if you just assume that the players are going to win the encounter. The games are usually set up that way. The math is usually set up that way. And so what happens a lot of times is people, GMs, who do not have this ability of adaptation, who do not have this ability to sort of adapt on the fly, when this encounter starts to go a little south and they realize maybe the party's going to have to run away, or maybe they'll start fudging. Because they go, in their minds, they are just locked on this next encounter has to happen. And for this encounter to happen, this encounter has to happen. And it has to resolve in a certain way. And once you get locked into that line of thinking, that's when you're removing player agency from the players, right? And that's where I think the games start to lose, some of what makes them special. All right. So, what I want to do today, again, is maybe in line with the improvisation and adaptation. I'm kind of winging this one a little bit. I have a couple notes, not as many as I normally do. But, again, I really want this to be more of a kind of a workshop session. And one of the things that I thought we could do today, if we have time, and I think we will, because I don't know how many categorical skill ideas I have for this, but I did think that I could walk you through what I think for me is one of my biggest sources of being able to improv, and what really helps me develop that skill set, and show you a lot of this stuff is really well documented and written down in things like Dungeon World and things like PBTA, because those are game systems that are designed around this. All right. So first things first, let's try this. All right, we are on 5. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit then. Okay. So we got first skill of our improvisation, and okay, maybe this isn't a skill. All right, so much as it is something that you have to be aware of. Okay, which is know your game system and how, good, or I guess you could say easy, it is at adapting. All right. So the fact of the matter is there are game systems out there which are much easier to throw things together on the fly. All right. And for me, okay, the two biggest, and again, this is not a knock on these types of games. I love these games. Okay. But it is something that we have to be aware of. For me, the two biggest, I don't want to call them red flags, but for me, the two biggest red flags are complex stat blocks. All right. And battle maps. If your game relies on complex stat blocks and battle maps, you need to do a lot more work to be able to improv. All right. Because if the party goes off of the beaten path, it's a lot harder when you are playing a game that has complex stat blocks and uses battle maps to throw things together. What am I talking about here? D&D 4th edition. Game I love, complex stat blocks, battle maps. Pathfinder 2nd edition. Complex stat blocks, battle maps. That doesn't mean that you can't adapt, okay, at these games. In fact, there have been people who have run, Pathfinder 2 games and 4th edition games, kind of, off the fly, but you have to do more work ahead of time to be able to really do it well, to do justice. Now, I am of the believer that, I could randomly look into the 4th edition monster manual and pull out a couple of monsters and put them into an encounter. And yes, technically from the math of the game, this is quote unquote a encounter of an appropriate level. However, respecting that 4th edition D&D and respecting games like Pathfinder 2nd edition that are trying to create a sort of tactically challenging, tactically enriching combat experience, it is, I don't necessarily know that is going to be the best encounter that you've ever run. Now, that's okay. Not every encounter has to be the best encounter that you've ever run, because what you're gaining from that is the ability to be flexible. And so if the party ends up going in a direction that you didn't expect them to go, instead of shoehorning them in, that right, we assumed they were going to take the forest path, but they choose to take the bridge path instead. Right. And instead of saying, well, the bridge is blown up and you can't go that way because I have an encounter planned in the woods and you have to fight that encounter because I did such a good job of getting the map ready and I have all the stat blocks and I really thought about the monsters and I've got this good array of artillery and bruisers. Right. You've got this whole thing planned, which is awesome. And that's probably a really good encounter. And then you should be proud of yourself. However, if the party does go to the bridge, okay, and you still want to have a combat encounter there, now you need to start thinking about what is, motivated. Now Laughing Out Loud says you could just move the encounter to the bridge. That is probably the baseline easiest way to do it. But that being said, if our encounter was a bunch of wolves led by an evil druid, it may not work as well. Now, if you're familiar, if you really know the game system, okay, and you have resources available to you, like monster stat blocks and maps that you can quickly pull out, then I might be able to quickly go in there and, Compy says the bridge is guarded by a troll. Assuming this is 4th edition D&D, we would want more than that. It's guarded by a troll who's actually enslaved by a trio of harpies. And so now we have a troll, maybe 2 trolls, 3 harpies, and now we have this encounter. And the harpies are going to try to use their siren song to lure adventurers over the edge of the bridge. And the trolls are going to be walking around smashing people so that the party can't just focus fire down the harpies, right? We have this, maybe this relatively cool encounter that we threw together. Now, how was I able to do that? Well, because I played a lot of 4th edition D&D. And I know the DNA of 4th edition D&D is implanted in my head. And I know that a trio of controllers, or maybe a duo of controllers with 2 bruisers or 2 brutes is it's going to make for an interesting tactical experience. It's a bridge, Compy did throw out the idea of a troll, but why not lean into that trope? And boom, I can just pull that out. Secondly, because I'm really familiar with that game system, I can look at that stat block. Okay. And I can quickly assess and understand what this creature is about. 4th edition D&D, for example, is really good at that because it'll say at the top, this creature is a bruiser, this creature is a soldier, this creature is a controller. So you understand, okay, how do I need to use this creature? So the more complex the stat blocks are, the more, 3rd edition D&D, 5th edition D&D, Pathfinder are notoriously really bad at this. And the reason is because a lot of creatures in those systems will have these huge list of feats and abilities and, God forbid, spells. And some of the spells are more role-playing or fluff, and there's just a massive list of things to do. And it could be very overwhelming. Now, if you are a Jedi master of the system, then you're going to be able to quickly pull those things out and throw them together. But if you're relatively new to the Pathfinder 2nd edition game, then you may find it very hard to, be flexible and adapt when it comes to spinning an encounter up out of the fly because it's complex stat blocks and battle maps. Now, that being said, there's a lot of things that you could do. And I saw a Darth, who, by the way, is one of those, when I was talking about GMs who can run Pathfinder 2 kind of on an ad hoc basis, Darth is one of them. I think it was Darth. Let's see here. Yeah, the more complex the system is, the more you have to prep to adapt and improvise, right? It's, what is it? What does Ben Franklin say? Failing to prepare is, planning to fail is planning to fail. No, what is it? Failure to plan is planning to fail, right? You need to be set up into a situation where you have empowered yourself to be able to adapt and improvise. And so while you can be, adaptive, you do have to do a little bit more, I think, prep work. That doesn't necessarily mean every session, but this is where you have things like, and this is where products that are released can be very useful. Pre-written encounters, having battle maps available. Maybe you have an encounter or two in your back pocket. I've talked about this before in my 4th edition videos. I used to keep what I would call generic encounter templates available. And I didn't put in the monsters because maybe I need to use this at level 2, but maybe I need to use this at level 18. But the sort of the general layout and the gist of the combat is going to be the case. In one case, it might be, a simple bridge, a wooden bridge over a fast-moving river. But maybe I use it at level 16, and it's a bridge of skulls, on the first level of hell. And instead of trolls and harpies, now it's, bearded devils and Ironies flying overhead. I can use the same encounter template, but I can get more mileage out of it, and I have that ready to go. But I had to do the due diligence, right? I had to put in the work. So there are certain game systems, and usually if they have complex stat blocks or battle maps, you have to understand this is going to be a factor. Now I do want to bring out something that Trey said. Moving to VTTs basically killed my ability to improv a combat at the table in person. I could scribble whatever I want on a dry erase map, but be picky about getting the best art for the maps online. So, I think that I am guilty of this in that I get trapped in my VTT space. I know a lot of people do. You know what? Let's actually I'm going to make this a note here. Okay. VTTs don't have to look don't have to look like AAA games. Okay. I know that we all get into this mindset where, and I'm guilty of this, right? We have these awesome Foundry modules. They have, glowing runes and monk's active tiles, and you want to set it up so that when the player steps in the right tile, it triggers a sound effect, and then the trap is automatic, and you have it set up on a macro. We've gotten so. And why? Why do we want it to look that way? Because because we can't help it. We see VTT, we think it's a video game. I mean, that's just what happens. All right. So, I think that what Trey is suggesting is, we have to sort of break ourselves out of that habit of being like, I have to use a perfectly created, perfectly constructed battle map with all the walls drawn in, right? And so, and the dynamic lighting turned on and all this other stuff. No, we don't. Okay. Because that's not what our RPG should be about. I rail against this a lot, but I sometimes I worry that people are more concerned about the style than the substance. And at the end of the day, it's not the flashy VTT. It's not the cool miniatures. Okay. It's the experience of being part of a collaborative storytelling experience. That is what makes the game. That's the substance of the game. Everything else is just razzle dazzle. All right. And I think that, most VTTs, at least, all the reasonably good ones, have very robust sets of tools that you can use to quickly draw a map, just like I would do if you were playing with me at our home table and I had my Chessex mat rolled out in front of me, just a blank grid with the generic sort of beige color texture of a Chessex battle mat. And I'm going to quickly sketch. Okay, here's a room. There's something over here and there's something over there. Yes. Is that as good as, some beautifully printed out 300 DPI thing that I got from some awesome, person map maker's Patreon? Nope. It is not. But we're playing, and that's okay. And the game should look good in here anyways, right? Not necessarily down there on the screen or on the map. So, we have to sort of, we should approach VTTs as being actually something where we can get the best of both worlds. And I will admit, I'm still working on this. Part of my problem with VTTs is it's very tempting for me to want to, craft a really beautiful looking experience. And I've heard a lot of people who spend way more time preparing for their game sessions now that they are running them online than when they were running them at home in person. It's almost like they feel this pressure either on, driven by themselves, or they have this illusion from the players that, it needs to look to a certain, a certain quality, or it won't work. Let's see here. Lollipop says it's easier to improvise and adapt when you have more wiggle room. Leave blanks. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it. Again, a lot of this stuff is just Dungeon World advice, kind of restated in different ways. Right, and this is where things that are released. This is where having monsters and bestiaries. I think sometimes I feel like the people who are making these products are doing us a bit of a disservice, because like it's cool that they give us this monster book full of new monsters, but it's like, that's not necessarily what I need at the table. What I need is, like you said, something that'll help me build encounters, either as part of prep or on the fly. Like I one of the things I've talked about this before. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull this up, a PDF. I just got to find it. Because again, if it seems like I'm just talking about how much I love D&D 4th edition, I promise you that is not my intention. All right. This massive PDF is loading, I think. Oh, it's just really zoomed in. Weird. Holy shit, this thing's massive. Oh, I see why it's like that. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, sorry. Took me a little bit here. But this is something that I thought was so good about the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition game. Again, it's because I feel like they were legitimately trying to help me. Man, I cannot find anything today. They were legitimately trying to help me with prep, but also if I needed to, right? Like improv stuff. Okay. So here's Monster Manual 2 from 4th edition D&D. And we've got the section here on the Durgar, right? The gray dwarves, the dark dwarves. And right off the bat, they give us a couple of different Durgar. Okay. So already this is kind of cool, because it means that if I need to bust out a Durgar encounter, if I bust out, a lot of us are guilty of this. If I was playing Pathfinder 2nd edition and the group was like, oh, you encounter a group of ogres, you know what you're going to fight? An ogre, an ogre, an ogre, right? You're going to fight 3 ogres. They're going to have identical stat blocks, and they're just going to be right there from the game. Now, I can tell you that if the group, let's say I had a level 4 party and they, went somewhere and suddenly they're fighting a Durgar, I could pull out this sheet of paper right here and say, okay, I'm going to put 2 Durgar guards, which are level 4 soldiers. I'm going to put in 2 Durgar scouts, which are level 4 lurkers. And, and they'll be led by a Durgar Theurge, who's a level 5 controller. Boom. 2 soldiers, 2 lurkers, 1 controller. That's a great encounter. And they're all Durgar, and they're all thematically tied together, right? So this book is giving me the tools that I need in order to build Durgar encounters. But it takes it a step further. Now, they did this for us, which is awesome. And I love it when game companies do this for us. That doesn't mean that you couldn't do this. When I talk about the prep to improvise, to adapt, when you're playing Pathfinder 2nd edition, I feel like this is the stuff that we need to be doing. Either you need to be doing it as a GM, or, the game needs to be doing it for us. So additionally, we've got this. Now, in this case, I only have 1. Some of these stat blocks have 2. Here's an example of a encounter group. They just give us a pre-made Durgar encounter. By the way, it looks kind of similar to the one that I pulled out of my ass, but you can see here it has 2 Durgar guards, a scout, a Theurge, and it uses 4 orc drudges, which are level 4 minions. In this case, maybe like some of their slaves. On the other hand, right, we could just shoot right ahead here. Here's some giants, and giants are obviously higher level. Remember, 4th edition went to level 30. So this is Monster Manual 2, not Monster Manual 1, but here's 2 encounters, one for level 18, one for level 23, using not just giants, but other monsters, so that the encounter feels like it has a lot of dimensions to it and it has a lot of fun to it. So these could be really, really powerfully useful tools. And I'll be honest with you, I use this stuff all the time. Just because, well, you know, it gave me cool ideas and it saved me a lot of time. And I would sometimes use this during prep, but I would also, if suddenly the group needed, you know, was going through the forest and they needed to fight gnolls, I could just pull this out and get a gnoll encounter going for level 4 characters. And, you know, and we were good to go. So, you know, that to me was very, very, very empowering. And I always found that to be very useful. So there is an element here where, you know, in order to prepare or in order to be able to improvise, you do need to be able to, you need to be able to prepare a little bit and understand that some games are better at this than others. I mean, we all love the cool tactical combat, but it does come at a price. Either you have to be a guru master of the game, which to be fair, some GMs are. You know, I imagine that it's been a while, but I could probably do a pretty good job of that with 4th edition. But yeah, I mean there's a lot of work that goes into that. Sorry, I thought my dog was sleeping at my feet. Oh, there he is. He hurt his leg today, so he's kind of limping around. So poor pup. Anyways, I'm just trying to get caught up on the chat here. Yes, and on a VTT, if you want to low prep something with battle maps, you definitely have to lower your standards. Absolutely. Now that doesn't mean that you have to be completely, again, not prepared. I know there are tons of really good assets that do not have grids on them, and it's just like this is generic grasslands image for a battle map. This is generic snowfield map for a bit. This is just a generic road through a field map. This is a generic woodland map. Just have like 5 or 6 or 7 of those in your back pocket. And if you're on a VTT and the group is somewhere that you didn't expect them to be, boom, you pull that image in, right? You drop a couple of tokens in, maybe throw some tiles down to represent some terrain, like as if you were using the old cardboard tiles from D&D and you're just putting them on the map. It's fine. Yes, it won't have the walls and the vision. Dynamic vision will be able to see through it. So what? That would happen if we were sitting around the table anyways. And you know what? That style of play was fine for 50 years. It's still fine today. It'll be fine on your VTT. God forbid that the dynamic lighting lets you see through the boulder that technically you shouldn't be able to see through. We all understand that. That's just the way we've been playing. So I agree with that. Let's see here. Yeah, exactly, Lollipop. Good stuff. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, that happened all the time. I mean, again, it may not be as pretty to look at, but as long as the game experience is awesome, then we're in a good place, you know? Yeah, I like this. I like this from Lollipop. The VTT is a canvas. Let it work with you, not against you. Don't accidentally make it into a video game. Duncan DT has a question. Improv question. What is your thought process for honoring criticals in the narrative to make them feel special? Like getting 3 successes in a year 0 game or natural 20s in D20 systems. Duncan, my thought process for honoring critical, actually, so Duncan, you know what? Again, we're improving here, right? This whole stream is about improving. So let's talk about the third, sort of my third point, okay? Which is embracing yes. Okay. And specifically, and you may have seen this actually in the MCDM game. I was surprised that they took this, but there are, okay, 6 levels of yes and no. All right. There's the yes that we're all familiar with. Okay. But there's also, okay, yes, and there's yes, but there's no, but there's no, and then there's no, and, okay? So I'm going to close your little message here so it doesn't get kind of up. So what does this have to do? I can't write philosophy. Okay. My Wacom tablet is like lagging for some reason. So this is a classic improvisation technique, right? Where we keep the story moving, we encourage creative input from our players, but we can also use this as the results of our D20 rolls. And, obviously, if you have a group that's very much a stickler for the exact rules of D&D or, Pathfinder, you may want to be careful with this. But I can say that I played 5th edition D&D in my last year. I ran a campaign, and I basically house ruled a lot of it. And one of the things I basically did is I essentially, every D20 roll, got mapped to one of these 6 things. Now, there was no hard or fast rule of exactly what value was what. Some of it was just based off of me going with the flow and going whatever. But if somebody succeeded at a check and they just barely got the DC, right? They got, if it was everything by default was DC 11. If they got an 11, or a 12, I would say yes, but I would add something afterwards. Yes, you attack the orc, but as you drive your weapon into him, his buddies, and we were playing theater of the mind. It was all very loosey-goosey. As you drive him back, he stumbles backwards and his 2 allies, step in front of him to shield him, basically making it so that, you can't keep attacking him. Again, we're just talking about in terms of the fiction. You succeeded, you hit him, but now he fell back. Now he's kind of in the back rank. Well, to your point about crits, I am always looking for an opportunity to say yes and. And this is a great opportunity where I, as the GM, can offer them more than I ever, that they would have ever wanted for. You can offer them something with or without a cost. You can use that as an opportunity to put your spin onto the game and use it as a way to reward them. So the answer is, I love to reward critical successes. And I do it by using it as an opportunity for me to sort of interject with additional value. When we play Forbidden Lands, you mentioned Year Zero, I'm running a Forbidden Lands game right now. And a lot of spells and treks don't really care how many successes you have. Some do, many do, right? For each success you get in fishing, you get a unit of fish, right? But there's a lot of checks that don't necessarily have a benefit for having extra successes. But when a player rolls really well and they get 3 successes on a roll to, let's say, make camp. That's a classic example. I don't think that there's any, you either make the camp or you don't. So to make the camp, all you need is 1 success. Doesn't matter if you get 2 successes or 3 successes or 4 successes. But if somebody was making their bushcraft survival check in order to make the camp and they succeeded with 3 successes, I would feel very much encouraged to yes and that moment and give them something, but also give them a little bonus or give them a unique opportunity. Again, it could be with or without a cost. But the point is I like using those opportunities to flex my creative muscle because that's me, having fun. That's why, there was a thing on the Patreon the other day, why do you GM? And ultimately the reason I GM is because I like the challenge of having to adapt and figure out a through line through the story that makes the most sense. And that's one of my favorite things here. Let's see here. Going back to the previous one, PF1 Monster Codex was similar in this approach. It's a good one. PF1 Monster Codex was A+. I love that book. That was a fantastic book. Perhaps maybe they will go this way with NPC Core. So I didn't watch it, but I heard about it. It seemed like it's pretty good. Mike T, good to see you. Thanks for hopefully you have a fantastic time with your family. Barbecuing with them sounds fantastic. Great. I had a GM literally draw green lines on a blank VTT map while we were playing. I was perfectly fine with it. You know what? Yeah, Spencer, I think that is that, look, I get it. We all want the cool, element of a component, but cool visual elements, but I'd rather just a GM kind of go with the flow. But thank you for the subscription. Daggerheart made an interesting choice to formalize the matrix of yes and no but. Yes. I like the ones with and or but. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's okay just to say, yes. I would say if any of these need to be sort of removed from this, list, it's this one, right? Because, and essentially this is what Powered by the Apocalypse does, right? So in Powered by the Apocalypse, your 10 plus is here, all right? Your 7 to 9 is here, and then your 6 minus is kind of somewhere in here. And again, the 6 minus could also be yes, but it's the GM's decision. In most Powered by the Apocalypse games, you do not have a yes and condition. Now, some Powered by the Apocalypse games, Magpie games, introduce the idea of sort of a fourth category where they call it a crit. Most of the time, I think it's a 12 or higher. And they will have this idea of a yes and moment. And I will be completely honest with you. If I'm playing PBTA and someone, maybe if they don't roll 12 higher, but if they roll double sixes on their TD12 or their 2D6, I'm very inclined to do a yes and. And to be fair, that is completely in my rights, because when the player succeeds, okay, typically the play returns to the fiction. The players look to me to see what happens. And when the players are looking to the GM to see what happens, the GM gets to make a move. And one of the opportunities, one of my GM moves is I can offer an opportunity with or without a cost. So I can use that moment in the fiction to offer that player or the group an opportunity without a cost. It's just a free thing. The orc's line begins to buckle. You see that several of the warriors are falling back, and now you can see that there's an opening to get to the orc shaman in the back rank, right? That someone rolled a really good roll on a hack and slash roll. They were just fighting some orc minion. They were fighting some orc brute, but they rolled really well. So sure, they hit. Sure, they do their damage. Sure, maybe that orc is dead. But I also use that opportunity to use a GM move to give an opportunity, in this case without a cost, which is suddenly the orc's line is faltering. The ferocious assault of the barbarian has started to break the orcish line. The panic is spreading, and the once, thick wall of muscled orcs that was blocking the path to the orc shaman has started to fall apart as the orcs begin to scatter, their morale breaking. And now and I go, so what do you do, right? And then I push it back to the players. So what do you do? And then maybe, the rogue or the ranger, who knows, the wizard, the ranger says like, oh, can I get a bead on him through the gaps? And I go, absolutely you can, and then we get to that, and the orc, the ranger takes a shot, or the rogue dives between two orcs and does a leaping somersault and comes up right into the orc's, chin with his dagger. Or the wizard, she uses that moment to do something cool. I don't know. But point is, PBTA doesn't formally have this, but I do it anyways, because I do think it's so important. And this matrix, yes and, yes, yes but, no, and no and. And again, maybe trying to stay away from no. I mean, if I have the biggest complaint I have about adaptation and improvisation, it's that 5th edition D&D, it's that Pathfinder 2nd edition. Still, I mean, a good percentage of your roles in the game are just going to be no. And no is just like such a momentum breaker. It's just such a backbreaker, right? And I know that people will go to play like a PBTA game with someone like me, and some people react very badly to it because they say, man, so not only did I fail, but then something bad happened too, right? Which is like the no and result. Obviously, in Pathfinder 2nd edition, you have this in the critical failure condition, but by and large, the critical failure condition only happens, a very rare percentage of the time. For me, as a player and a GM, but when I say a player, I just mean someone who's sitting at the table and engaging in this game, I am much more interested in one of these two results, okay, than this one, because, I came here to watch shit happen. And for me, it just feels so much more dynamic and cool. And I could be wrong with, I could be wrong about this, but like when I'm running a PBTA game and we're in a combat or something like that, and a player, engages in hack and slash, and they miss, in D&D terms, they just missed, but when I'm able to use that miss and it turns into a story moment, like that is really, really cool. And when we were playing Dungeon Time Extreme, which was our 5th edition campaign, I was basically running PBTA, but using a D20 system. And again, there was no formal range, but if a player rolled badly, I was going to respond to that. So I remember they were fighting in the Caves of Chaos, and somebody's character, I don't remember who, was fighting against a gnoll or maybe a hobgoblin. they rolled low on their attack roll. And I described how the creature, blocked the weapon with its shield and then, knocked the shield or knocked the guy's weapon out of his grasp, and it went fluttering across the stone floor. Now, in D&D terms, that would have just been a miss. Not a critical miss, just a miss. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, just a miss. But they rolled fairly low. And for me, and my players respond very positively, it led to this moment where I think the character ended up, reaching out and like punching the hobgoblin, and then they were like wrestling over its shield, and then the player character got a hold of the hobgoblin's shield and then kind of like, used it to sort of bash the creature's face in. And that's the kind of scene, I think, when I describe that. I think if you watch a lot of fantasy movies and Game of Thrones or whatever, you might see something like that play out, and you see that on screen. And it's a kind of cool moment, right? The fighter character is suddenly weaponless. They have to adapt. They punch the gnoll. They're struggling. They're rolling around in the dirt, trying to get, the gnoll's going for you're going for your dagger. The gnoll's biting at you. You have to let go. The dagger's kicked away. You grab the creature's shield. Boom! You bury it into the creature's skull. It's this very visceral fighting moment, and you want to see that. That's a cool thing to see on screen. But that would never happen in D&D. That would never happen in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, right? It almost couldn't. It would be very inefficient, and you would never attack that way, and the game system would punish you 18 ways to Sunday for even trying to do it. And so, again, understanding that to play in this way is, asking your players to sort of accept some of the ideas of trad D&D, trad D20 not being sort of available. All right. Let's see here. Interesting. Well, Cephalopod, the algorithm hates us. Yes, Fabula Ultima has a fantastic system of crits. When you crit in Fabula Ultima, it doesn't mean I do double damage. A critical is a yes, you automatically succeed, and you get an opportunity, and you get something cool, right? And it's a cool moment for the player to sort of put their narrative stamp on the scene. And I think that's really cool. And you don't necessarily have to be playing with a fully narrative game for this to be the case. A lot of people are like, oh, so I crit the monster, so reinforcements arrive? That's stupid. That's lame. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you could still tie it directly to the fiction if you want, if that's the kind of game that you want. But I do love that for that reason. Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's their success, Darth Gorlock. I don't think it's necessarily always the case that the GM should be the one completely in control of that. That's part of the big fun of that. But Wicked Ones formalize that. Well, that's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, because obviously Forge in the Dark has the idea of the critical success with the double 6, which is, again, something I do like about Forge in the Dark. Let's see here. Yes, but, no, but, and no, and allow the narrative to unfold in interesting and unexpected ways. Way more than just the hard stop. No. Yeah. And imagine watching a heroic movie where the protagonist just fails and that's it. Right. Usually no is it. You know what? I actually completely agree with Lollipop. The rare time I use no by itself, it's just a comedic effect, right? It's when Bob tries to run up the sword, and I'm just like, no. All right, next. Right. It's almost funny because of how weird it is. But again, I encourage you, and I understand that this may not necessarily work with every group, and it may not necessarily work well with every system, but I encourage you to think about this yes and philosophy. And it's a little bit more complex than that, right? It's yes, but, yes, and, no, but, no, and, because this will develop that skill set of, keeping the story moving forward and encouraging creative input from the players. And really, I think, tying your game consistently and constantly back to the fiction. And that is what, for me, what is so important to these things. All right, moving on. Because again, I did want to try to do our little experiment here. So we've talked about this on the prep, but I'm going to talk about it again, which is keep lists of random elements. Okay. Just random stuff. list out names. We've talked about this big time. You know, I mentioned we did this last stream. I was like, this is like a sneak preview. You know, names, encounters, items, locations, right? You know, twists. Just have some stuff ready to go. Be prepared to be unprepared. And you know, this is more important when you're playing with a game that requires more preparation. But even when you're not, I've talked about this before, I will pretty much not play a game without a list of names. I'm not the best at just coming up with a name. And so having that close by to me is very, very invaluable. Great Goldworm says points of interest. That's another good one as well. It kind of tied to locations as well. All right. Next one. All right. Flexible prep. We kind of touched on this a little bit. Make NPCs, but don't state what they're there for. Don't state who they are. Don't state why they're there. Leave things like their sort of motivation, or their goal. I guess it's the same thing as their motivation. You know, etc. Leave that stuff blank. All right. Instead, you just have an NPC, right? Who's a world-weary sellsword. And you have this NPC ready to go, right? And you kind of if it's a more complex game, then you have some of, you know, her stats available. You know, you might have a couple of notes about their, you know, some of their mannerisms or maybe some of their personality traits, but like what they're actually to be used for, that you leave blank. That doesn't matter. This character could end up being working for the villain, or it could be someone that you meet at the tavern, or it could be someone that you meet on the road. The point is that you have this very flexible NPC ready to go. And you can use the same idea for locations, battle maps, battles, items, everything that we talked about ahead of time. When you're designing these things, try to keep them flexible. Try to keep them sort of generic. That way you can just fill in the blanks to, you know, what you need for that moment. And that way it's a lot easier for you to have some of these stats and some of these preps built out without having to actually rely on that. Unikatsu says, I used to keep notes of the voice I use, like Liam Neeson or Grandmeister Paisal. Yeah, absolutely. You know, voices can be kind of tricky. You know, I talked about this before about how I don't think I've ever voiced the same NPC the same way twice, but that's just because that's tough to do as well. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it's totally fine to focus on that Voinupula. Like maybe the character has, you know, again, I like to say that, right? Lollipop said, the hooks, not books. So I don't need the full background of this character, but maybe I just have this thing, you know, wields giant, you know, bastard sword. And, you know, maybe it's super special. It's got a special hilt. And I don't know anything about it. I haven't decided why it's special or if it's special, but it's just, you know, a cool little brief bit of moment. But what it is and why it is, that we can leave open, right? And this kind of gets to the gist of what these last couple of things have been. Again, this is straight out of Dungeon World. So I'm not doing anything here, but, you know, draw maps, leave blanks, okay? Now, this obviously applies to creating maps, literal maps, whether it's a dungeon map or a nation or a town. It's a good idea to build maps. Maps are very useful, but it's also very good to leave blanks on that. But, you know, maps is sort of a euphemism for any of your prep. So when you are creating these stat blocks, when you are creating these ideas, leave some of the details out and let the sort of fiction and the play and wherever group that goes through the situation kind of dictate that. Maybe you have a powerful item, but you don't really know exactly what all of its powers are. Maybe it's druidic, but maybe it's clerical in nature. Maybe it's powered by dragon's blood and it's tied to sorcery. We can kind of leave some of that stuff a little bit, nebulous. And, it's a little bit different than a quantum situation. Because a quantum situation in my mindset is designed to create a singular outcome, right? The quantum ogre problem exists in a world of railroading. This is the opposite of that. Now, I know what some people are saying. It doesn't feel real if it's not concrete. And I can appreciate that. And there's definitely a style of play that I think benefits from having everything decided out beforehand. Everything's written down. Everything's coded in. And you have to follow, the procedure. But if you're going to do that, then you only have, in my personal opinion, one option. And that's to play in a dungeon. Because that is what a dungeon is designed for. A dungeon allows you to essentially fully prep an entire environment without having to prep everything, because there's only 18 rooms in this entire dungeon, and then still allow your players freedom to go left, go right, go north, whatever, but they can't go to a room that doesn't exist. And so the whole reason the dungeon exists is it's a way to deal with the problems that are generated from trad D20, which is to say, stat blocks and battle maps, but also allow adaptability and flexibility. I love classic D&D. I love 4th edition D&D. I love Pathfinder 2nd edition. So, but I also like RPGs for the freedom that they offer. And that's why I always find myself going back to dungeons. It's why I always find myself going back to site-based locations, because it allows me to give the players free reign to do as they please without feeling like I need to literally prep everything under the sun and that the players are going to come out of left field with a completely unexpected direction. If I'm confident the players are, they're in this dungeon, they're going to this dungeon, and I have, the 10 rooms of this dungeon prepped, then the players may only hit rooms 1, 3, 7, 8, 10. But that's okay. I have those prepped. And the ones that they don't use, I could just chalk them up. I could, scratch off the serial numbers, use them someplace else in a future dungeon. There's a lot of options for me, especially if the players literally never go back. But for me, that is sort of an ideal. Now, I know not everybody feels that way, but for me, that is the case. All right. This is another one for being adaptive, which is learn to redirect. What up? Karamo coming in big, hot with the $40 super chat.
I am strong.
Cheers, sir.
Strong.
20 dropping the $40 from Karama, dropping the tuition to put chat through GM Trade School. Lots of openings in the GM industry. Karama, thank you for that incredible support. That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to keep these GM tip streams coming. We're going to keep going. I mean, this is going to turn like a 24-hour stream total. Someone said I should do it as one video when we're all done with that. Karama, thank you so much for that. Appreciate your support and appreciate you looking out for your fellow game masters. It's true. Game masters is a dying breed out there. Maybe not in Knights of Last Call. As I said before, I think over 85%, I can't remember our last survey, but 85% of our patrons, of which we have over 400, are active GMs. They are running games or have run games in the last, 3 to 6 months. And I understand that is a very, very, very strange percentage, that most RPG spaces these days are pretty much dominated by, mostly players, because people don't want to be a dungeon master. And I don't necessarily blame them. It's tough, especially coming in without the history and the background or the advantage of this channel and this community of which Karama is a part of. So thank you so much for that. Their 20th super chat. That's hot fire, buddy. Hot fire. Thank you, Karama, for that. Hi, Luce. I have said this. I have said this many times. I don't even know if I've said it on the stream, but I've been saying this for years, going back. You're absolutely right. Okay. This It's 1981's basic Dungeons and Dragons. This is the Moldvay Cook edition. All right. This is what the rules of Dungeons and Dragons were in 1981. Now, by this point in time, first edition AD&D was out, but this was the basic game. All right. Then you got this game. And this was the expert rule set. All right. And this set of rules covered basically the first like 3 or 4 levels of the game. This game covered, levels 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 game. The assumption was, as Luce is alluding to, this, when you started the game of Dungeons and Dragons, they were like, you're in a town, the dungeon's just outside the town. There's no overland travel. You basically just go to the town and then you go to the dungeon and then you go into the dungeon. Because not only was that good for the players, it was also good for the GM. It's learning how you learn how to be a GM. Dealing with overland travel. There weren't rules for traveling overland in this version of the game. They did not appear along with like mercenaries and hirelings and NPCs. They did not appear until the expert set, because part of the idea of the game was we don't want players or the GM to have to deal with that. That is an extra level of complexity. And when you think about most starting adventures nowadays, they are these epic Lord of the Rings style quests where you are just, going over, a vast area, and it's just like ripe for players. Naturally, they're not trying to be jerks when they do this, but they want to explore. That's why they're playing an RPG game. I mean, some RPG players just want to stay on the ride and just follow the path. That's fine. But there's a lot of people out there who really do want to just explore the space. And they might even be used to video games. And in some cases, the video game can feel like it's more open world than your RPG if you're being a GM who's especially hard-headed and refuses to sort of adapt, because they're like, man, if this was Baldur's Gate 3, I could have gone that way and it would have been totally fine. But I was playing an RPG and it felt so restrictive. I was playing a tabletop role-playing game and it felt so restrictive. That's fucked up, right? We need to stop. We need to get better. This is the legit GM channel. Well, we try. I mean, again, I'm not trying to tell anybody that this is the one true way to play. I'm simply saying this is how I play, and I encourage you to think about your practices and what is important to you and how can you get better at that. That's all I would say there. The OSR sandbox generator I picked up starts with hex number 1, town, hex number 2, dungeon. Then here is how you generate the rest. That's perfect, Lance. That is the way it should be. Now, I'm not, that intro dungeon might only be, maybe a couple levels deep. It only gets the group up a level or maybe 2. But yeah, like dealing with the overland travel and all these other challenges wasn't something that new players, new GMs, or low level characters were really especially geared to deal with. So that's amazing. So back to what we're doing. Learn to redirect. So when your players throw you a curveball, and they will, find ways to redirect that action back to, to elements that are already existing in your campaign. Now, what does this mean? Am I talking about what I was, poo-pooing before, where like the adventure is going like this and the players go this way, and then I go, you know what? We're not going this way. You guys are going back on the track. No, that is not what I'm saying. Although I did say that if you get good at these skills, you can use your powers for evil. Instead, don't think about the narrative that you prepared. This is terrible. Instead, think about what is going on in your game. And we're going to talk, this is the last thing we're going to talk about is fronts. But understand, what are the forces at play in your game? One of the things that you can do that I find to be very, very empowering is when the group does decide to take a left curve, where they do decide to, take a left curveball, is learning to redirect to your prep. Okay. So what does that mean? What it means is that if the group decides to do something different, that's fine. But, and if you shouldn't be trying to set them back onto the pre-written story path that the adventure had, or that you wrote out, which, to be fair, I don't think you should have done that anyways, but regardless. But when the group takes a right-hand turn, I think it is too much to ask for you, the GM, to start literally creating whole new campaign concepts out of nowhere and out of nothing. Okay. So what I instead ask you to do is redirect to stuff or ideas or concepts that you have already prepared. So what does this mean? Well, let's imagine that I have a front. I'm being very generic here, which is, orcs are bad. Okay. And they're attacking the town and they're attacking the village and they are holed up in the woods. Okay. And the group decides to not go to the woods. Okay. They decide to go around the woods, as we've talked about before. Well, this is where my campaign having some other fronts. Okay. So maybe I have another front where I have gnolls, and maybe I have another front where I have, sort of a shady wizard. Okay. He's not necessarily evil, but he's a little shady. And I have some information for them prepped, and I have some ideas that I have already sort of laid out for them when we talk about fronts. When the group decides to say, you know what, we don't really want to deal with the orcs, we're going to go around them. Instead of forcing them back to the orcs, which is kind of in a way what they were saying we don't really want to deal with, and then getting into a situation where you feel like you're kind of creating a quantum situation. What I'm suggesting is that take the fiction, take what feels appropriate, make whatever steps that you need to do, but you already have done some work on these gnolls. You have already done some work on the shady wizard, okay? So if we can use that prep and we can redirect the party's attention to that prep, then that's where we can feel like we are both prepared and also completely adaptable at the same time. And we are making this up as we go along, but we're not asking ourselves, we're not putting it on ourselves that we literally have to make up everything from nothing. All right. So I think that this could be hugely beneficial for a lot of things. Joel asks, new here, what's a front from very short version? Well, fronts are originally from Apocalypse World, but were pretty popularized in Dungeon World, which is a PBTA game. And we will talk about fronts actually at the end of this stream. That is what we're gonna focus on. What are the dis/advantages of using clocks versus fronts? Yeah, we'll talk about that too, Lollipop, because that's going to be like my last thing. I do want a couple more tips, GM skills. All right. No one's going to like this one, but this is true. Know your game world. A lot of us play in campaigns that are set in pre-written game worlds. And sometimes the key to being able to adapt and to improvise comes from knowing your game world really, really well. When I sit down to play Legend of the Five Rings, I have a pretty good knowledge of who the Crane clan are and who the Lion clan are and who the Scorpion clan are. And so when the group does something unexpected, I can draw on that knowledge, which has come from, reading the books and reading the lore books and all that other stuff. So I have this rich tapestry of information that I can use to not only come up with a good new idea, but also to make it feel internally consistent and logically consistent, that the group will feel like this feels like what this world should feel like. This feels consistent with other decisions that have been made. And that's because me as a GM, I know my game world really, really well. If we were playing in a game of Forgotten Realms, okay, when you're in a situation and the Zentarum are attacking the party and somebody random shit happens and they're like, okay, we need to find some support because before the Zentarum take over this town. So they go into a tavern and they're being really subtle about it. They're looking for support and asking the bartender, and the bartender's like, I think I know a guy. And then they introduce you, and so you go, oh, I'm going to have them meet a Harper agent, because, the Harpers are natural enemies of the Zentarum. And you're like, okay, but how did you know to include a Harper agent? Well, because I know Forgotten Realms really well, and I know this area, and I know that the Harpers operate out of this part of the realms, and that they are natural foes to the Zentarum. Knowing your game world, okay, whether it's a game setting that you bought, or knowing the home world that you've created, is very valuable. because you will feel more comfortable being able to sort of draw from those sources. This is one of the big advantages of this is not for me personally, but one of the big advantages for a lot of people in running a Star Wars game or a Star Trek game or a Lord of the Rings game. They are already huge fans of the IP. They know ships, they know major players and factions because they've read the books and they've watched the TV shows and they've seen all the movies many times. So they feel like they have this wealth of knowledge about the game world that they're playing in. And so when the group throws them a curveball, they can just simply say, oh yeah, you're looking for an out of the spot place that, whatever. Oh, you should go to Tatooine, or you should go to, Geonosis. And when they get there, you're like, oh, they find some ancient, evidence that shows how Anakin betrayed the Star Order, because that's where Anakin and Obi-Wan had their final duel. It was on the planet of Geonosis, right? And you have that knowledge. And so you can sort of tie things into the wider world around you with more skill and aplomb. I think people have different thoughts and opinions on this, but I think if you're going to use a campaign setting, use the campaign setting, Oh, did I say Geonosis? Mustafar? All right, looking it up. See, Star Wars is not on my... let's see, Mustafar. Oh, yep, okay. What the fuck? What planet was Geonosis? Is that the one where they fought Dooku in Attack of the Clones? Let's see. Geonosis is by Tatooine, by the way, so I wasn't too quite wrong with stuff. Yes, okay. Okay. All right. I got my two separatist planets mistaken, okay? But see, this is what I'm talking about, all right? Rick Sherman and Panic, they know their Star Wars. So they can pull that out. If they needed a lava-strewn planet, then they would go with Mustafar. And that's also part of the, advantage of playing those games is that, a lot of people who are playing them, they're there for the tropes. They're like, oh, this is cool. We're getting to go to Mustafar. I know what that looks like. I can draw upon my shared memories and shared experiences. So it's pretty cool there. So knowing your game world, very, very powerful. Again, this isn't always the most popular bit of advice, but use open-ended questions. You don't have to do this alone. And I think we are in a new era of RPGs where we should be turning the narrative over to our players, and allowing them more agency in shaping some of the narrative elements. Now, you don't have to make it so crazy that it's like, Fate, where you're declaring a narrative truth and you are just like, completely rewriting the reality of the world as if you had, the reality stone inside of your Infinity Gauntlet. It doesn't have to be like that over the top. But at the same time, if you ask the fighter, a question about a character, an NPC's fighting style, and, you ask them where that, that fighting style is from, right? That's not like reshaping the reality of the world, but it's giving the fighter the ability to add something unique to the system. And more importantly, it's going to allow you to be able to adapt and improvise a lot better because, number one, you don't have to make everything up. Number two, when we go with that, or when we use that leverage, it's going to feel more, the players are going to have automatically more buy-in to it because it was their idea. So, when in doubt, turn some of the narrative over to the players. Ask them open-ended questions about their actions or decisions. This is like a top secret thing here, because this is the other thing. Jonathan, thank you for your first super chat, Jonathan. Thank you. Very nice.
I am strong.
Cheers, Jonathan.
Strong. Strong.
It's 1984. My friend steals a bag of Detouring and fails his saving throw. Fast forward to Loki, Journey into Mystery episode. Eerily similar, except no alternate versions of himself. Yeah, that's a great... That's a great improv moment. Eerily similar, but no alternate versions. That's pretty cool that happened. Thank you for your super chat. Thank you for the support. Solana does bring up a good point though. That you sometimes can get the problem right of the hyper expert, right? The player who knows more than you as the GM, and they're like, that was never a separatist world, okay? That was actually always firmly in the command of the Republic. If you had read the 5th novel of the Tamarind Vibe series, then you would know that the clone troopers used that planet as a launching off point for numerous attacks within the sector. And when that happens, you should go, awesome. Okay, we'll go with what you said because that sounds cooler and more correct. And that's okay. Let the players, have that flex. Let them have that knowledge. Because I was going to say, the open-ended questions don't always have to be, and I've mentioned this on several streams, they don't always have to be about the world, okay? They don't always have to be about the world. They can also be about the character. Something happens in your game. And you can say, Solana, this just happened. How do you feel about that? Jonathan, you just discovered, you guys just realized that the king's brother is actually the villain, right? I mean, assuming that just happened in your game. How do you've served that royal family. How does that make you feel? Were you expecting this? Do you feel betrayed or angry? Tell me. I want to know how your character's feeling in this moment. And suddenly Jonathan is adding this whole new dimension to the game, and we can play with that. But the other secret secret tech here is it also can buy you a lot of time. Okay, because I'm not trying to say that, if you need the time, okay, all right, if you need the time, then you can ask, all right? In other words, I don't think there's anything wrong if the party takes a really, really crazy turn and you say, guys, gals, I'm going to need 10 minutes just to think about what we're going to do. But sometimes, remember, we're just GMs here. You can stall by FBT, okay? If the group really takes a crazy turn and you didn't expect any of this and you want to keep the flow of the session going, then sometimes you could throw an open-ended question to the players or prompt a little bit of a debate and get them to sort of start, debating about whether they should support the brother or not. And they're like, well, yeah, but he's evil. Yeah. It's like, yeah, but he's the rightful ruler. It doesn't matter. The king is dying and he left no heir. So the brother is the legal heir. It doesn't matter what the situation is. And we have to be loyal to that. I'm a lawful character, blah, blah, blah. And you're just getting there. At that point, I am, I've said this before. I don't like to just sit back while the players just shoot the shit too much. I like to be more active. But if I didn't really have a ton to go on and I'm kind of winging this whole thing by the seat of my pants anyways, at that point in time, I'm just going to shut up. I'm going to let the players, maybe I'm just taking notes. I'm going to let the players do what they need to do and use that time to either be listening and looking for ideas to prompt me into the next part of the game. Or maybe I go, this is the time I need to look up some additional NPC stat blocks or some additional things. And instead of the group sitting around doing nothing, they are heavily engaged. Now, I don't think you should completely check out. You should be paying attention to that. That's a valuable part of the experience. But, now Lollipop also says you could also buy time with Orcs Attack. Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, I would say that buying time is different in this situation. That's more like, we got an hour left of the session and I have no idea where to go from here. We'll have Orcs Attack. It'll end with a combat. And then, even if we finish the combat earlier, let's say there's still 20 minutes left in the session, that's where the GM says, and I think we'll finish there for tonight. And everyone goes, okay. And I do this all the time. I mean, my players certainly don't complain. They'll have a lot of responsibilities. I would rather end the session a little early than, keep trying to grasp at straws and give myself more time to prepare. So let me give you a good example of this. In our last, actually, you know what? We're here. We're shooting the shit. Everybody's being good. Karama's throwing down $40 super chats. We've got Jonathan throwing down $10 super chats. We got Lollipop throwing down tips. We've got Josh throwing down tips. So let's take a look at something here. I need to go to my game manager. Okay. All right. Loading, please wait 1 second. Howdy, Boothby. How's it going? Is this loading? Oh, it's just taking a long time. So in our last Forbidden Lands game, all right, hold on a sec here. Window capture. Forbidden Lands. All right. So in our last Forbidden Lands game, you gotta love that 4K screen on the 1080p. So in our last Forbidden Lands game, the group was here at Halvard's Ferry, and they were going to turn it into a stronghold, because in the previous session, okay, the group had explored or had gone and killed a bunch of Rust brothers at their camp to rescue the sons of Halvard, okay, who owns the ferry. And the group knows that the surviving members of the Rust brother attack are probably going to return to their homeland, gather a force and strength, and return and probably try to destroy Halvard's ferry, assuming so that the force behind it was originating there. And the group has, again, this was completely unplanned, but the group, in fact, this location is one that we just kind of randomly made up. But this has kind of become the staging off point for the group's explorations of the Forbidden Lands. In fact, you can kind of see it's kind of at the hub of everything that they have been exploring. And, you can see up here that they've explored the Temple of the Serpent, and they've come down here to Freygrove and the burial mound of Hrothgar Wolfsbane. And then recently they, journeyed here to the southwest to this Rust Brother camp. They discovered the ancient fortress of Weatherstone, et cetera, et cetera. So they like it. And they're like, you know what? We kind of want to make a stronghold anyways, because that's part of what the game wants us to do. All right. So they need a lot of wood, because this game has stronghold building rules. And so the group is trying to figure out a way to get a lot of wood safely and easily. And they decide, hey, look, there's this forest down here to the south. It's right by the river. We can send some people there. We can harvest wood for a week or two. And then we can get one of the barge people that comes up and down the river. We can pay them, and then they can ship the wood back to Halvard's Ferry. And then we can use it to build, wooden palisades and some towers to offer us some defense. So while that's happening, Smith, who is a druid, decides to go north. And I kind of not sure what he's planning on doing, but very quickly, it becomes clear. They had a random encounter twice with a griffin, okay, in this area of the plains. And both times, the druid used his druidic powers and copious bribes of meat and food to basically kind of have the griffin be, chill with them and easy with them. So this time he goes up there and he's basically like, hey, what can I do for you to help you if you'll come help us if our enemies attack? And we're going back and forth with the griffin and all this other stuff. And he makes a persuasion check and an animal druidic check. He succeeds, and I say, okay, the griffin goes, okay, I'll help you, but I need a mate. And by the way, I am just making this up out of my ass. Now, where did that come from? Why did I say I need a mate? Because I'm thinking it's a griffin. What more could it want? It has food, so it wants a mate. It wants a female griffin mate. And so Smith goes, Derek, do I know where any female griffins are? And he makes a lore check, and I said, they were hunted to extinction out of the plains. They're very rare now. And he was like, shit. So then he casts a spell, which is basically like a superpowered divination. And in this game, the power of a spell is sort of determined randomly by your dice roll. He rolls really high. He gets like 4 successes, which is a lot in this game. And so his mind gets sent over the vast distances. And I describe far to the north of where they are. By the way, this has been our entire campaign so far. It's just been this area. And I describe that far to the north, across the lands of Vivend and Farvaland, are the homes of one of the dwarf clans, and that they raise and breed griffins. and they have, you know, a ready supply of female griffins. Now, how did I do this? Well, number one, I knew just from my preparation and reading from Forbidden Lands, I knew that a tribe of dwarves lived in this area. I know nothing about these dwarves. In fact, I am almost 99% sure that these dwarves have nothing to do with griffins and would never use griffins. However, as you know, if you watch the beginning part of this stream, I used to play World of Warcraft. And so when I think dwarves, I think griffins, okay? Because even in Warcraft 2, you had dwarven griffin throwers with their throwing hammers. You have the wild hammers. And of course, the Alliance uses griffins to transport their characters around. So for me, dwarves raising griffins just seems natural and correct. I know Aaron's played a lot of World of Warcraft. Tim has played a lot of World of Warcraft. You know, so my group is going to go, oh, yeah, dwarves have griffins. Duh, of course it is. So this is an example of me using my knowledge of the game map where I know there's like a random book page that shows you kind of roughly where the different races and, you know, groups and factions live. So I knew that a clan of dwarves lived in these mountains. I stole a little bit from World of Warcraft, which I knew would be sort of, you know, improvising with my group. But here's the other thing. I have no idea how he's going to get there. I have no idea what's going to happen when he gets there. That's a huge, big ask. Okay. And so the Griffin basically says, he's like, well, how am I supposed to know where to go? And the Druid, Aaron's character, says, oh yeah, I'm offering to take you there. So if you'll let me ride you, I will guide you to the mountains to the north because I have seen the vision. I have used the magic. And the Griffin says, okay, deal. And the Druid hops on the Griffin's back and they set off to the north. And that's where we ended it. Now, here's the thing. At that point, I have stretched myself about as far as I can go. Could I probably keep improvising? Sure. But that's a big ask. And so for me and for Smith, that was kind of the end of his session. All right. Then we focused more back on the other characters who were trying to harvest wood from this forest, which, by the way, they had a random encounter and they were attacked by a ant who then chased them out of the woods and the forest and luckily didn't kill them all because of a nice diplomacy roll. But the group had to flee and leave. Ironically, they needed wood to be able to build their fortifications. They remembered about this old mill that they had found on the river about 2 hexes to the southeast. So they decided to head there with their force of people to try to salvage what wood, planks, beams, posts they could from the old mill, use that to take it back to Halvard's Ferry and rebuild the descriptions. And that's where we left the session off. But for Smith, in this situation, in this moment, after that moment occurred, I was like, okay, you know, we're going to end the session there. You know, you may not get another scene for the next, you know, half hour of the game or whatever's left for the night because, you know, this was completely unexpected. This was like 3 levels of unexpected. And so boom, there you go. And now the session ends with the Druid, right, mounting onto a griffin, which in this game world is like a monster, right? And they are heading north to the unknown. Now, what's going to happen here? Who the hell knows? I have no idea. But this is what time has given me the chance to prepare. And now I can get ready for it and maybe think a little bit about these dwarves and maybe read a little bit more about them. And then also think about how they fit into some of the ideas that I have for the game and give some unique challenges and yada, yada, yada. But that is sort of an example of me kind of, stalling and, you know, being totally willing to go with what the players are trying to do, but also being aware that, you know, sometimes I have a limit too of how much I can do. So yeah. You know, and that kind of leads me into my last official skill for improvisation. And I mean, this may not sound like a lot, but it actually is an important skill because I've been doing this for a long time, people. Okay. And I'm like one of the biggest proponents of this. And even I struggle with this from time to time. Okay. Which is relax and enjoy the unexpected. Most of us, all of us, pretty much, have come to role-playing games from D&D or Pathfinder, which is D&D. And we are used to this challenge mindset, where even if the game isn't about winning and losing, it is about winning and losing. And the players you are trying to challenge the players. And the players are trying to beat your challenges. And it's very easy for it to feel like I'm challenging the players. They are trying to beat me. And it can be very, very deeply rooted in all of us that when the players come up with some crazy idea, that you can feel like they're trying to fuck you over. All right. And that you get that initial gut instinct, that initial gut feeling of they're trying to pull a fast one on me. They're trying to get away with something. They're trying to cheat the system. They're trying to, avoid any consequence, right? You can just have this knee-jerk reaction. And even I get it sometimes. And realizing that, you're the game master. You are not there to beat them. You have infinite resources. It doesn't matter if your orc chieftain that dies and you're like, I had such big plans for him. Relax. Just go with the unexpected, because you're not there for the orc chieftain. You're there for the party. You're there for the group experience. You're there to see what's going to happen, right? And I think that enjoying the unexpected, right, what Dungeon World or Apocalypse World calls playing to find out, that is what you need to learn to embrace, okay? The reason why we play is because we precisely do not know what is going to happen. Now, I could be in my mind, right? Going back to my Forbidden Lands example, I could have this really cool idea of like, oh, the Rust Brothers are going to gather up a strong skirmishing force, and they're going to march in force with 50 men. And to try to destroy Halvard's Ferry and leave a message to anyone who would oppose the Rust Brotherhood, right? And now I'm hearing, Smith's trying to get a griffin, and he's going to try to, to have a monster ripping through their ranks. And it can be very tempting to be like, oh, I had this cool idea about this big fight. No, it's not about me. It's not about my story. I shouldn't have everything planned out. I should be loving that. In fact, I do. I mean, this is one of the reasons I love playing with players like Smith, is because they make it exciting. They make it unexpected. And playing to find out is this is the philosophy that you need to understand, because all the other skills will only help you once you've embraced that, as Lollipop says, this vibe, right? So it's a vibe. You have to be willing, able. You have to let go of your ego. You have to let go of your pride. You have to let go of your biases, your presuppositions, okay? And only then will you truly be able to enjoy this. And there is this like moment. You should be very proud of it if and when you have this moment. But there should be this moment where the characters are like, you're like, I'm trying to say this. There's a moment where the players do something and you have this instinct to say no. And instead you just kind of like let go and flow with the process, right? And you say yes, and suddenly you're in uncharted territories, and that could be really, really, really fun. And that's why I play role-playing games. I mean, ultimately, right? That's why we have dice in role-playing games. It's because dice generate unexpected outcomes. I could go off on an entirely separate subtangent rant about how a lot of these modern systems use dice, but then also seem to be doing everything they can do to control and remove randomness, which kind of seems like it defeats the purpose. S.E. Voldo, a former player of mine, says, but we are trying to cheat the system. I mean, fair play. I'll respect that. Take care, boy. Dan says, this is the most important thing GMs need to internalize. This takes all the stress off your shoulders and puts fun in the game. Yeah, I agree. I think it's really, really important. All right. So, we've talked about this before in the game, but we've talked about this before on the stream. So let's kind of, again, talk about what are the things that you need to do in order to be able to focus on improvisation and We're going to be playing Tuesday again, Rich. We're going to be going to Crushbone. Well, we're going to probably be fighting pawns and camps outside of Calithian, but then hopefully gain a couple levels and get into Crushbone and start, fighting in the yard at least. That's the plan on Tuesday. So, number one, you have to be aware that some game systems are really easy to improv and adapt. Blaze in the Dark, Forge in the Dark games, right? There literally are not stat blocks for NPCs. They do not exist in any capacity whatsoever. So it is extremely simple to improvise and to adapt. Okay. There's no 5-foot squares. There's no battle maps. Okay. Even if you have one, there would be nothing to do with them. There's no initiative. There's no combat rounds. Okay. So that system is geared towards this improving and improv adaptation play. Now, to be clear, I think all GMs should be improving and adapting. And that's one of the reasons why I like those systems, because I don't have to do as much work. Because if you are going to use a system that has complex stat blocks and battle maps, then you need to do the homework. You need to do the prep. You need to do whatever it takes so that you can be prepared to be unprepared, right? And as a side note, VTTs don't have to look like it's a AAA video game. All right. Just because we're using a VTT does not mean that you can't just draw something quick on basically a virtual dry erase board. You need to be able to do that. Embracing this yes and philosophy and going into the sort of nuances of that, but look for opportunities to add dimensionality to the results, add shades of nuance to what's going on. And that is a great skill to be thinking about, not just binary outcomes, but also looking for places to add little touches of color and add little touches of challenges. This is one of the things that I think Powered by the Apocalypse games do a really good job of, because Powered by the Apocalypse games naturally map the results of the 2d6 roll to these, to the 10 plus, the 7 and 9, and the 6 minus, and those all map to slightly different areas along the path. But everybody needs to be prepared, so keep lists of stuff that you need. Names, encounters, if you're playing a game with more complex stats and complex information, items, location, twist. Now, we live in a time and a place where, we have internet, we can look things up quickly, we can just pull stuff out of our ass. But again, we realize that, a wand of fireball needs a lot more information in a game like 5e D&D or Pathfinder 2 than it does in a game like Dungeon World. Doesn't need as much stats and doesn't need as much information. So again, sometimes those games can be a lot of fun, but if you want to be able to be adaptative, I don't know what the form of that is. If you want to be very good at adapting, you're going to have to do a lot of work. Also, keep your prep flexible. If you are going to put in those informations, okay, adaptable. Sure, that works. All right. If you do want to be adaptable, do that. But if you're going to do that work and you're going to put that stuff together, those stat blocks, those NPC blocks or whatever, then keep it flexible so that way you can fit it in anywhere that you need to use it. And this gets to that philosophy of draw maps, leave blanks that we always talk about from Dungeon World. Learn to redirect to your prep. If the group is supposed to, engage with one force or one element of your game world and they decide to go in a different way, that's fine. But don't be afraid to redirect to your prep. That doesn't necessarily mean keeping them on the same linear path that they were supposed to, quote unquote, supposed to go on. You should give them their agency. You should give them their freedom. But this is where having things like fronts prepared can be really, really powerful. Knowing your game world, again, preparing to be unprepared. The fact of the matter is, if you know your game world very well, then you're going to be able to be more adaptable because you're going to be able to make things connect. You're going to be able to see connections between different factions and groups and nations and ideas and some of the movers and shakers of the world. Use open-ended questions about the world, about their characters, just to kind of keep people engaged. And it doesn't always have to be you that's adapting. Sometimes it could be up to the players, and it's okay to share that. And if you need to time, you can ask for it, but sometimes you can just stall. You can throw a combat in, you can get the group talking to one another in FBT. Sometimes you just need some time. And lastly, most important skill that I think that we need to work on is just relaxing and enjoying the unexpected. Play to find out, let the game happen and don't feel like you need to, hold on, but loosely, right? Hang on to those, hang on to the leash, but very loosely. Don't be afraid to let go. You should still be in control of your game, and you should still be running the game, but don't hold so tightly onto your preconceived ideas and notions that you feel like the players are trying to subvert you, or they're trying to, beat you, or they're trying to get one over on you. That's not a good mentality, for anybody. All right. I don't know what the hell happened there. All right. So we've talked about this before. So let's talk about this again. This is sort of like a bonus, a bonus thing here. Okay. Fronts. All right. Let me grab something here. All right. All right. So this is a Dungeon World front. Can I lock this? Yeah. This is a Dungeon World front worksheet that actually comes with, you can download it from dungeonworld.com or whatever. That is sort of a worksheet for creating a front. All right. So what is a front? What in the front? All right. So a front, simply put, is a collection of dangers, threats to not just the characters, okay, but also to the people, the places, the things, the ideals that the characters actually care about. All right. And it's always going to include a couple of impending dooms, some terrible and horrible thing that is going to happen if the PCs were to do nothing. It's a way of it's like outlining, it's like taking a step, it's like taking a moment of prep to understand what is at stake here, and what are the PCs trying to avoid and trying to fight against. But the most important thing about this is that the fronts are never set in stone. In fact, part of the idea of this is that the group will be changing, disrupting, completely eliminating certain dangers and certain fronts in their entirety. That's what heroes do, right? So another way to think of it is this is sort of like the playbook for the bad guys. And it's you as the GM can use this as a source for when you're playing the game to understand what actions should follow naturally from the player's actions during the course of the game. All right. Again, you're going to make these outside of the game system, outside of the game session. So the first thing is to understand the type of front that you could have. So it could either be a campaign front or an adventure front. So a adventure front is one that is only linked to a single adventure. Pretty standard, makes sense. A campaign front is one that's going to take place over the course of the entire campaign. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a separate stream for my patrons. So it's going to be a patron-only stream. But I am going to take a classic adventure from 3rd edition D&D, from 5th edition D&D, which is called the Sunless Citadel. I was going to do this earlier today in one of the Discord Patreon channels, and we were just going to type about it. But instead I was like, oh, you know what? I should do this on stream. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about fronts here, but then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show how you would take a classic adventure like Sunless Citadel, which again was from 3rd edition, but they redid it in 5th edition with Tales of the Yawning Portal, and show how you would frontify that basically, and use it for a more, sort of expansive and operative play experience. All right. So if you're a patron, be on the lookout for that, because that's going to be coming here, maybe this week, maybe tomorrow. So keep an eye on that. All right. In fact, maybe it'll even be a special patron video. So let's talk about fronts. So a campaign front is a problem that's going to be dealt with over the course of the entire campaign. An adventure front is one that's going to be dealt with just in the course of one adventure. A description is simply put just some basic information or notes about what the front is about. The cast are the NPCs that are going to be used throughout the course of this front. Wow, this is really thick. Okay. My board is being very problematic. So for each front, you're going to sort of lay out the cast of characters, NPCs and otherwise, that are going to be involved with it. What are the stakes? What is at stake with this front? And it can't always be so simple and stupid as like, will the town get destroyed? You need to think a little bit more broadly than that. And we'll talk about that in the special video, but like ask questions like, for example, remember we were giving our example before. So maybe one of the fronts, right, is the usurper, right? We were talking before about this, right, where you found out that the king's brother, who is the legal heir, has actually been doing some shady, evil shit. But legally, he is the king's heir. And while there is another potential person who could take the throne, they are not the legal heir. They do not have the legal authority. So one of the stakes questions might be, will the PCs support the true heir? And the implication being that, like, or will they betray the kingdom that they have sworn to defend in order to put a more, goodly person or a more righteous person or whatever on the throne, even if that person isn't the legal heir? As a GM, when I'm writing the stakes questions, these are basically the questions of like, this is the stuff, this is the good stuff. This is what I want to know about this, from these playing events. I don't care about the combat results. I don't care about whether or not the PCs are going to, be able to defeat an encounter or not. Hell, if we're playing a modern D20 game, the answer is probably 100% of the time, yes. I want to know, like, this gets back to like that mouse guard stuff. It doesn't matter what you fight. It's what you fight for. All right. That's the plot of The Man in the Iron Mask. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay. Obviously it's a go-to, but that's right. I kind of vaguely remember that movie. I think I just remember it had Leonardo DiCaprio. Except his brother was like still alive or something. I don't remember. Anyways, or maybe, no, you're right. He was like it was like a twin brother. I don't remember the exact plot, but anyways. So when you're figuring out the stakes, these aren't the only things that are at stake, but they're just the questions. This is only for you. This is just for you to be like, what are the questions? What are the things that I want to sort of constantly be going back to and sort of getting into? So like, will the PCs support the true heir? Maybe another question is like, who will the people support? Right? Maybe / will there be civil war? Right? Will you get, this is kind of getting more into like a Game of Thrones War of the Five Kings thing. Are the people going to be united behind one ruler? If the people unite behind one ruler and the PCs support a different ruler, what will that happen? What will cause that? Or will the people fracture and some factions will support the one heir and some factions will support the other person, and suddenly you end up having a civil war? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the end of the campaign, right? This is the beauty of these ideas, is we're avoiding cataclysmic end of the world type stuff, because quite frankly, that stuff can be kind of boring and not leave you with a lot of wiggle room. The thing about these stakes is the party could win or lose. That's not important. What's important is answering these questions of, but who did they choose to support? And what did that mean for their character? This is getting into some of the more storytelling and story emerging elements of the game. I'm not writing out the story. I'm not going to write. And then the party will discover that the usurper is actually an evil dude. Then they will vow to bring him to justice, and they will immediately support the false pretender because he's a good guy. No, I'm not assuming that at all. In fact, I'm assuming nothing. In fact, the question I'm playing to find out is, who will they support? Will they support, the lady who is the king's, sister or whatever, who's usurping the throne but is the legal heir? Or will they support the pretender, even though that's a better, quote unquote, better guy? And maybe there's a third faction of someone who has no right and no claim to the throne, but has the support of the people and would be a very wise and judicious leader, right? And so they're like the complete natural choice, right? But they have no claim whatsoever. And you kind of just set this in motion, and you see, and then the thing is, you do not know the answer. You can't know the answer. You shouldn't know the answer. So that is what we're doing with the stakes. And then, but in order for a front to be, and when it says fronts, you need to think like battlefront, right? Like a war on two fronts, a war on three fronts. The idea is you never just have one front. Okay. You have multiple fronts, and the group should constantly, they can't fight all fronts at once. That's why it's a front. So if they're dealing with the usurper, then another problem, which is the orc war chief who is gathering all clans to him, okay, in the mountains and the hillsides outside of the kingdom, waiting for his moment to strike and burn the nation of Azeroth to the ground. That's a different front, okay? So maybe these are more, we're kind of describing maybe campaign fronts here. So you've got this like political front, and then you've got this orc army invading front. And maybe there's a third front, right? Which is a group of mages who are doing experiments, and they don't realize it, but they're in danger of opening portals to the far realm. And they're going to allow in these, unspeakable Cthulhuian evils. Okay, cool. Third front. The idea is all three of these things are kind of happening and going on at the same time. We're going to use these to color everything that's happening in our game, and to use as a signpost to help us improvise and adapt, because this is us preparing to be unprepared. All right. So with a front, after we sort of understand the stakes, we want to write down two to three dangers, maybe four dangers is a lot for maybe a big danger. And dangers are sort of driven by their sort of threat and what kind of threat are they? And Dungeon World does, now again, you can use whatever you want. I mean, this is just an example list from Dungeon World, but Dungeon World divides it into ambitious organizations, planar forces, arcane enemies, hordes, or cursed places. All right. So these are the types of dangers that a front could sort of be a part of. So obviously, in the case of the usurper, right, we might have some dangers. Now, let's take, again, you can make up whatever you want, but Dungeon World uses some examples to specifically fit the fantasy theme, but that's fine. So here's some examples of ambitious organizations. So one is the misguided good, a cult, a religious organization, a corrupt government, a cabal. So the first threat, right, of the usurper is this, right? We've got this ambitious organization, and it's the corrupt government. Okay. This is the brother, right? This is I put it on the wrong line. So it's an ambitious organization, and it's the corrupt government. Okay. So this is the king's brother. Okay. That's one of the dangers of this front. But another danger, right, could be this misguided good, right? So it's an ambitious organization, but it's the misguided good, right? So this might be the the likable bastard, right? The likable bastard son that the group might come about. And it's like, okay, so let's just focus on those two dangers. All right. We've got the king's brother and we've got the likable bastard. Okay. So we have to think of what is the impending doom for each of these. And again, Dungeon World gives us some suggestions. We don't have to use these, but if we want to, it can make it a lot easier. You get a lot of mileage out of these. So tyranny, pestilence, destruction, usurpation, impoverishment, rampant chaos. So we'll say that the impending doom of the king's brother is, let's say that the impending doom here is tyranny. And again, we can write down more details about this. But the idea is that if this danger comes to pass, then the king's brother, who is an evil man, will achieve legal right to rule the kingdom and begin an oppressive reign of tyranny. On the other hand, this is, again, us as the GM. If the likable bastard wins, and actually he's a pretty nice guy, but he's no ruler. And so we might say rampant chaos is the impending doom, and civil war will spread because and war will come to this weakened nation because of the weakness of this character at being a leader. So as a GM, this is the idea of like, if we stood back and let the players never got involved, what would happen? And the idea is that it should be bad, otherwise it's not a danger, right? And it doesn't have to be world ending, okay? Just because the king's brother imposes martial law and tyranny and high taxes and whatever on the people of the kingdom, and is sort of, abusing and misusing his power, does not necessarily mean that it's like the end of the world or anything like that. In fact, you might argue, oh, this sounds better than that. Rampant chaos, people starving in the streets, war, civil war. You're like, I don't know, this kind of sounds like it's not as bad of an option. The key is all of these dangers are going to be sort of flowing at the same time, all tied to just this one front. And by the way, this is just one front. We're going to have a couple fronts. We're going to have the orc army in the woods. We're going to have the evil wizards who are doing their thing. The group is going to feel like they are torn between everything. So how do we let the players know what is going on with this danger? And that is where the grim portents come in. Grim portents are basically like the signposts, the milestones along the way, okay, for this thing, this impending doom coming to be. Think of them as like, if this was a completely linear AP, right, a completely linear adventure path, these are the things that have to happen, right? Like in an adventure path, they have to happen, right, for the adventure to work. So it's like, okay, the grim portent might be that the first is that the king, officially announces that he is naming his brother as his heir. And then the second, grim portent is that, the brother, or the brother or the king becomes sick, right? And maybe the brother's poisoning or something. The third grim portent is that the king dies. Okay. And the fourth grim portent is that, or maybe before the king, actually, before the king dies, let's swap this out here. Let's do this. I'm going to get rid of the king dies. So the king becomes ill after announcing that his brother is the heir to be. Then the loyal order of good knights is disbanded, okay, by the brother's decree, right? He's trying to he forces this loyal order of knights to get disbanded because he doesn't want competition when he Kevin's. Then the king dies, right? Maybe he's assassinated, or maybe he just succumbs to the poison. And then finally, he is coronated as king. So this is like a checklist. If we are evil king's brother, this is our checklist, right? And we've got this written up on our chalkboard. The step 1, collect underpants. Step 2, unknown. Step 3, profit. This is our step 2, right? First, we're going to get the king to sign a royal document to announce us to officially make him his heir. You know, he never had a kid that survived. Hell, part of what the party might find out is that the king's brother, like maybe the king did have a son who died in his teenage years because the king's brother had him killed, right? And so the king has been heirless for the last, decade or more. And so the king's brother gets, him, convinces him maybe through a dramatic fashion to name him heir. Then the king suddenly becomes ill. Then the Order of Loyal Knights is disbanded. Then the king dies, and then they're coronated king. And when that happens, tyranny ensues, right? The impending doom becomes true. But here's the difference between this and an adventure path. Maybe the players, very early on, they get the bad EBGBs about the king's brother. They like, this person is completely full of shit, okay? And they start doing a bunch of investigating or doing a bunch of adventuring or doing over the shit that adventures, whatever reason, they get really into this concept. And maybe they find out that the king, or that the brother is trying to get the king to announce him as the heir. And they do some political machinations and they do some things. And then in a dramatic scene during court, they outlay the evidence that showed that the brother orchestrated the death of the king's son so many years ago. And it's a bombshell. And obviously that completely fucks up this timeline. And guess what? Good. Because that's the plan if the party doesn't get involved, right? This is what would happen if the party fails. This is what happens if the party doesn't do something. If our group comes in, maybe the king gets him to announce that he's the thing, and then the party gets really interested in him, and maybe they drop the bombshell here, or maybe they drop it here, or maybe they fight him and challenge him to a duel to the death and they kill him. Or maybe they announce in court that he is actually the murderer of the king's son. And the king says, arrest him. And then the brother says, now. And it's secretly, he had bribed the loyalty of the king's guard. And then they try to do a coup. And then the party has to fight off the king's once loyal guards because the Order of Loyal Knights has been disbanded. And they're defending the old king while the brother escapes. And then the brother flees to his fortress. And now the brother, if you could think about it in character, he's going to go back to his chalkboard and he's going to erase his plans because you know what? That shit isn't on the table anymore. Okay. The party did their thing. They got in jail. And then it's also you as the brother between sessions going back and going, I need to rewrite this. This guy needs a new plan. We need to come up with a new plan, new Grim Portents, a new reaction. So potentially, you might be doing this several times a campaign as the group basically stymies your plans. I'll get you next time, Gadget, right? And, full disclosure, the party might kill the brother in that scene. And guess what? Then, okay, that danger is resolved, right? Unless it's not, right? Unless some evil necromancer raises the brother and now he's like a half death knight type thing, right? I mean, it's D&D. You can do whatever you want. But there's still the other dangers of this run. And also too, that's fine. Maybe the group, they figure out that the brother was evil and that the bastard is actually a horrible ruler. And they actually get everybody to like the third danger, and that people legitimize it. Right. And while they're doing all this, the orc warlord, his front is out there spinning. And one of the things that you can do when you're playing in a game and the players are taking lots of long rests and the players are, recovering all their hit points and they want to build magical items, that's fine. That's great. But you need to be thinking about what is happening in the background, right? What is spinning in the background? It's certainly the case that when the players get really involved with a front and they get really, usually any one session is going to focus just on one danger at a time. But if the group gets really involved with one danger, yeah, you're probably going to be reworking that, rewriting that quite a bit. But when they don't get involved with the danger or they don't get involved with a whole other front, that's where you have your list of things. And maybe the group is actually dealing with the likable bastard, right? They're trying to find him. And while they're off away dealing with that, or maybe they're the classic D&D characters that say, orcs in the hills, we better go deal with that. And so they're out there tracking orcs, and they discover the orc war chief, and he has gained his power through a demonic pact. And, again, I'm getting continuing to steal from other genres and other themes. But while they're off doing that, and maybe kicking ass and taking names, the king officially announces his brother is the heir, and then he becomes very ill, and then the Order of Loyal Knights is disbanded. And by the time the party gets back into town, okay, the king isn't dead yet, but the party kind of finds out about all of this kind of at once, and they are suddenly aware this clock has been ticking. This has been spinning in the background the whole time. So, Lolly, I don't know if this answers your question about clocks versus fronts, but I do think that clocks to me are things that I can really quickly and easily throw down. One sentence, maybe even just one or two words, quick circle, / throw down. This is obviously a much more thought-involved process, and it's designed to set you up for success for future improving, right? In fact, I might say that this front could beget clocks that the party is going to try to spin and stop. And, you could think of maybe that some of these grim portents themselves have clocks associated with them, which is not the most terrible idea. But I think that fronts are a forgotten piece of tech because people got so enamored with clocks. And don't get me wrong, I like clocks too. Like if I was playing Blades in the Dark and the party pissed off, they stole from some smuggler captain, I might throw down a clock which says, Captain Kolb gets revenge. And I'm throwing this on an index card or a note card, and I'm throwing it right down in the middle of the party with big Sharpie. Everybody can see it. And I fill it up and I go, okay, we've got ourselves an 8 clock, and I'm going to tick 2 ticks. And when this fills up, Captain Kolb returns for his revenge, right? Because he's pissed off that you guys screwed him over, and he doesn't know who screwed him over yet. But as this clock begins to fill up, he's going to be putting more and more and more pieces together. And then eventually, when the clock is completely filled up, he figures out that it was your crew that screwed him over, and he's going to come looking for trouble. So clocks can be useful because they give players that information. Fronts are really more of a GM resource that I don't necessarily think that you should be as sharing. I mean, I think the party should know what are the dangers that are happening, because that's how you give them agency. That's how you allow them to figure out what are we going to deal with. But again, like a war on multiple fronts, the party should feel like we don't have the right resources. We don't have everything that we need to be able to deal with all of this. And, rightfully so. That's what makes some of the gameplay compelling. Now, I will say that, in traditional high fantasy or epic fantasy, the group isn't asked to make any sort of shortcuts. They can solve all the evils. They can make sure the right king is put on the throne and stop the evil wizards from opening a portal to Cthulhu, and also take out the orcs before they destroy, any innocent civilians, right? And some people, when they play RPGs, because they want to win. They want to win at everything, right? They want 100% clear, all achievements, nothing was left behind. They got it all. They had to make no compromises. They had to make no tough decisions. They just won, just winning the whole way down. They're the big damn heroes, and everything is fine. Oh, I understand that, because, real life is full of compromises. Real life is full of having to pick your battles. And sometimes people don't want to do that. And that is fair. I must admit, that is fair. And sometimes, that's understanding your play group and understanding what are you guys playing role-playing games for? What are you trying to get for it? If you have a group that just wants to, kick ass, kill monsters, save the day, feel like a badass, build out their character sheet, you're probably overdoing it with this front. Now, you might not say that's not the kind of game I want to run. Okay, but that's not the type of game your players want to play. So, you do have to be somewhat, this gets back to the communication, which is why that's the most important tier. You got to know what your players are expecting, out of a game and out of a game experience. before you would try to do something like this. So what we're going to do as sort of a Patreon bonus is we're going to go through and build fronts for the factions or the fronts from the classic Wizards of the Coast Sunless Citadel adventure, and we'll be doing that. All right. So part 3 in the books, and we've got a couple more to go. We've got 3 more to go, so we're halfway there. Well done. As we continue to talk about some of the, now granted, I did say that the other tiers, the next 3 skills are lower tiered, so maybe we can knock out number 4 and number 5 in one stream. Depends on how we like. But again, you guys have a lot of great questions. We have a lot to talk about that. Let's see here. Whipplestein can't wait to catch up and walk through the series. Looking forward to it. Let me know if you have any questions. Whipplestein, of course, is a member of our Knights of the Last Call Patreon. He can ask me questions directly live on our Discord, so he doesn't have to wait for that. But if you do have any comments or questions, drop them here in the video description. I try to answer them. But of course, if you want to be part of the live conversations, you want to be able to talk with me directly, that is what the Patreon is for. Check us out, patreon.com/Knights of the Last Call. Yeah, I mean, I view the front sheet as a hard limit. Like, it's not meant for writing books, right? It's literally hooks. So the fact that it's limited, I don't view that as like, oh, and you can just put it onto a secondary page. Nope. It is supposed to be short and to the point, short and sweet and concise. And more importantly, because the idea is that if and when the group gets involved, then they are going to fuck that up, right? Jonathan says, I've been making my adventures more like fronts than anything else since I started playing when I was a kid. Motivation, plans, and dilemmas is pretty much all I do as a GM. The players steer the story. And I think, again, if you're looking to improve your ability for adaptation and improv, then I think that's important. Because I should note, there are some people who do not play RPGs for that. They play RPGs because they want meticulously crafted combats full of tactical challenges. They want intricate, almost movie-like storylines, right? That have been carefully laid out by a series of professional authors, right? That's fine. Like to be honest with you, that's not why I play RPGs, but that might be why you or your group plays RPGs, in which case, being able to improvise and adapt isn't maybe as important of a skill. So I think that's important to note. Yeah, it'll be fun. Mostly it's just that this already took over 2 hours. So it would be like a 4-hour video then. And it's Sunday and I don't want anybody to have to sit here for 4 hours, least of all me. How many fronts is too many fronts? It's a great question. Think about that. Well, I think the number of front in an adventure, I would say like 1 is not enough. 2, 3, 4 is probably where my sweet spot is for an adventure. I'm a big fan of 3 for an adventure. 3 factions, 3 different threats, 3 different areas. 4 is okay though. It depends how much time you're going to spend there. For an entire campaign, I would say I think it's fine if it grows and shrinks as the campaign continues. Like you might start off with, 2 or 3, and it might get in a campaign as high as 4 or 5. I think if you get to like 7, that's a lot. Like that's just a lot of sticks in the fire, a lot of brands in the fire. Like I think that it becomes difficult for the players to even really have a full grasp of what's going on and understand the size and scope of that. So I would say that, as a GM, if you start your campaign with, maybe just 1 very obvious front, maybe 2, just to give it a little bit more dimensionality. And then as the group does things and becomes interested in other things, or you get new ideas that spawn from the fiction, you create a 3rd campaign front and maybe a 4th campaign front. And maybe the group deals with one of those fronts and it shrinks down to 3, and then it shrinks down to 2, and then you add another one and another one. And so it can kind of grow and expand between fronts. And that's another thing that you have to decide as a group, as a game master, or what is you prepared? Like, is your group's expectation that by the end of the campaign, all fronts will have been dealt with. All boxes will have been checked. Because there's a lot of players when you go, all right, and our campaign is over, you guys have dealt with that front. And they're like, well, what about those other fronts? We didn't get a chance to finish those. And GM goes, well, that's the end of our campaign. You know, we didn't have time to, the world story continues on. Maybe we'll make another. A lot of people like have a conniption, have a hissy fit. And they'll be like, no way, we're level 20. I just go teleport in and kill that guy real quick right before the end of the campaign. Because there's no way he's high level. And I just need, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I knew that we didn't literally check every single box. We didn't break every single pot. We didn't open up every chest. There's a strong completionist aspect to a lot of players that I play with these days, or I interact with these days. And it can be very frustrating for them to know that the game world didn't end with all thread lines completely resolved. It can be very frustrating. But yeah, that is a communication thing as well. Yeah, Jonathan, I don't want to be the old man yelling at clouds, but I agree with you. I do think video games have made us into that sort of mindset of completionist, break every pot, full explore, 100%, everything explored. I mean, that goes beyond just the storyline, right? It goes to the dungeons, the environments themselves. We did a mega dungeon in Pathfinder 1, Dragon's Delve, and it had 20 levels plus a dozen sub-levels. And there were entire levels of the dungeon that my group got 20th level, mythic rank 7 before they, killed the big dragon at the bottom of the dungeon. There were entire levels of that dungeon that they skipped. They found a teleporter, went past it, and that's okay. There were some levels that they stepped foot on once or twice and never went to again. There were other levels where they literally spent a dozen or 24 sessions and they almost explored, or maybe they did explore every nook and cranny of the entire level. That's the freedom of being able to do that. But again, having a group that is okay with those kind of, not everything needs to be completely filled in, right? So I think it's pretty cool. We are still going, John, but we are getting close to the end here. Just so everybody can have a nice Memorial Day Sunday if you're from the US. I know I'm looking forward to my Monday off, a little 3-day weekend. Random aside, just because, I've got you all here. We had, I don't know why this is, I'm going to start by saying this has affected me a lot more than I thought it was going to affect me. We had a nest of robins in a bush in our front yard. They were little eggs and, they were right by our front door. So when they hatched, whenever we'd come out, the mom or whatever would squawk at us. So it was pretty obvious that the birds were there, little fledglings. And the mom was sitting there, and then we put up a bird feeder or whatever for the robins. And they were feeding the babies. And then the babies fledged and they left the nest and they were still kind of around the area, coming and going. It's not like I can identify all of them by sight. Robins all kind of look the same. But I was coming home yesterday, 2 days ago, from a walk with my dogs, and a hawk just got one of them. I think it was one of the babies, and it flew off with it. And for whatever reason, I felt like my dog just got shot. I don't know why. Just the idea that those were my robins, even though they weren't even close to it because they were literally just in a bush in my front yard. But watching that hawk just snatch that thing up and just fly off with it, I was unnaturally angry at the hawk, which again, probably is just going to feed its babies, right? So it's circle of life and all that. But it did affect me. I was very surprised. This is completely out of nowhere, but it's just been on my mind, and I'm here and it's Sunday and there's 70 of us and we're just talking about that. I don't know if has anybody else ever had some sort of weird, strange attachment to a wild animal, even though you have no reason to? It is like Tony Soprano with the ducks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people can feel about that about NPCs dying as well. Roman Vesquez, welcome. Just became a patron, but I'm confused. How do you find the Discord? Well, Roman, when you signed up with Patreon, the Patreon will have sent you an email to your whatever email you use to sign up for the Patreon. That should have a link that'll take you to the Discord. If you have a problem with it or you can't find it, Patreon has a messaging system you can use to send me, the creator, a message, and we'll make sure you get it set up. But it will have been sent to whatever email address you used with your Patreon, because it is linked to your Discord. So it may have asked you about your Discord account. So sometimes some people have their Discord account linked to a different email address than what their Patreon is, and that's where sometimes there can cause problems. But yeah, let me know if you have any problems. But thank you, Roman. I look forward to talking with you. Sounds like a good boss for a root game. Actually, John, I was actually thinking it was making me think of Mouse Guard, right? Yeah, buddy, let me know. Again, if you need anything, message me on Patreon. I'll get to you ASAP. But again, it should have been sent to your email address. Sometimes it goes to spam, but a lot of times people aren't aware that their Discord is actually registered under a different email address, and it can get sent to a different email address than they might be expecting. So figure it out. I get mad when I hit chipmunks while riding my bike. Oh, I would have like a heart attack if that happened. I'm very pro animal. If meat wasn't so delicious and nutritious, I would probably be a vegetarian, just because I love animals so much. But I do like chicken. But that would break me. I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't kill flies. Like, I trap them humanely and release them. I'm pretty pro. I pretty much don't kill anything. Same thing happened to my neighbor's Chihuahua. She blamed us kids. Oh, well, yeah, that would be, if it was a dog, that would be even more brutal. Jesus Christ. Everything in your life, Boothby, is just a tragedy amongst a tragedy amongst a tragedy. Holy shit. Raccoons live under my deck every year. There's a litter, at least one or two don't make it. They make my life a living hell, but it always affects me. Right, exactly. Like, I'm not saying that the robins are like a problem, but they're squawking, they're yelling, it is kind of annoying at times. But like, yeah, I mean, I get it. That's just one of those things. Dies, doesn't make it. It's to the benefit of something else, but it is a rough way. Nature is fucking metal. That's the answer. Yes, there are different delicious meat versus loving animals. That is very accurate and very true. I did see some baby raccoons in my neighborhood. Well, especially because raccoons, they're like, they're cute. I think they're cute. I think baby raccoons are cute. I think grown-up raccoons are cute. I think possums are cute. I like animals. I like mammals. I like dogs. Anyways, improv and adaptation, all that stuff. So yeah, hopefully everybody has a fantastic Memorial Day if you're in the U.S. We're going to be back Tuesday with more EverQuest. We're still in exile. So we had about 30 or 40 people hang out with us. Again, our goal with that is really for just Bob and Aaron and I to chat with you all while we're playing. And, so even if you're not into EverQuest, for example, Bob, who is playing and is on the stream, he's not into EverQuest. And, we're not really trying to like focus on the game. We're mostly just trying to like play and have fun and, maybe see some of the similarities and some of the commonalities between that and other RPGs that we love, and just talk about our experiences with games and RPGs in particular. So definitely feel free to come and hang out with us. And then that'll be Tuesday. And then Thursday we'll be back. And of course, again, we're going to do a special Patreon thing for a bonus content for our patrons, where we're going to take Sunless Citadel and we're going to map it out as fronts. So is Thursday stream GM tips, or do we PvP it out in the Patreon polls? No, Lollipop Candy, we reached the tip goal. So that means it is already locked in as GM tips number 4 will be our Thursday stream. John says, it would be fun to see Bob's experience with a modern MMO like ESO now that he's experienced an old school one. Yeah, John, I kind of thought about that a little bit. Smith definitely said something about that. Oh, it just thundered. Maybe it's about to rain. Yeah, Smith was saying something like, if people like watching us play some video games or whatever, let us know. And also too, if you're a patron, especially because, we really just do this to hang out with you all. Let us know if there's anything that we could be doing differently with those exile shows. Again, we've been doing the studio thing for so long, like literally for 3 years. And I'm not trying to say that like we're not going to go back to that because that was awesome. But this is really just me throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. What do you all like? What do you all dislike? We might try some other things just to, for us, it's just a change of pace. It's something different. So let us know though, because at the end of the day, this content is for you all. And if you all think it's horrible and don't want to deal with it, then, then we're not going to continue to do it. Obviously, YOLO, we don't give a fuck. We'll just do whatever we want anyways, but we do have a certain amount of consideration for you all. So, even if this isn't our full-time job. So, let me know in the Patreon, let me know in KLC content chat, what other things that we might try or experiment with, or new options or something like that. Like, City of Heroes. I mean, I'm a big City of Heroes fan. I worked at a Jack in Box every week. Once the dumpster was emptied, a family of raccoons was trapped in it. I airlifted them out. They would cling to a trash bag. I lowered down and scampered out. There you go. Happy animal story. Thank you, Boothby. Smith would love that. Smith has got like double max level characters all throughout Final Fantasy 14. It's a lifestyle choice for Derek. I mean, it's a little bit more than that. I think about this channel a lot. I think about you all a lot, and what value am I bringing? My general sense is that a lot of other content creators are thinking about, how do I build engagement? How do I build subs? How do I build growth? How do I, make more money, get more sponsorships and brands and deals? We are doing better than we ever could have dreamed of, ever. But there is just no world where this ever is a full-time job for any of us. For that puts a lot of pressure off of me, because that means that I can just kind of do what I want. And, and if we make, a couple $100, each a month or something like that, like that's cool. It's fun money. So King Hadoop, we're kind of going, we're kind of just shooting the shit right now, buddy, but it's Sunday. I don't have work tomorrow. That's the main difference. I don't have work tomorrow. So like sometimes like when we like stream on Thursday and I don't have to work Friday, we'll go late on Thursday because I don't have to do that. John says, by the way, Derek, your KLC shirt remains my most comfortable t-shirt. I wear it all the time. I need you to tell me who makes them so that I can use them. Well, that is easy. It is because, and you know what, John, thank you for that, because it's a KLC official black tee. We got those made by a local t-shirt maker here, locally owned and operated. And we got them, however many our order was. And I got the most expensive shirt that they had available. So like they, obviously had their, whatever, Russell Athletic t-shirt or whatever. But this brand is Bella Plus Canvas is the name of the company that makes these shirts. It's Bella, Bella Plus Canvas, and that is who makes these shirts. I don't know exactly which brand it was. And holy shit, Armored Anathema, first super chat, $100. Holy shit, thank you, buddy. It's been a while since I've gotten to a stream, but here's my contribution to seeing you give Valorous Games Valor TTRPG a look. Just a warning that the editing is a little rough, but I've been running it and having a blast. Well, $100 first time super chat to take a look at Valor TTRPG. Well, you know what? Armored Anathema, maybe you have just picked our next Sunday's stream. After all, Sunday streams are usually Sunday system streams. I'm curious about this. So maybe we'll do this. Valorous Games Valor. Let me take a look at this. Valorous Games. Okay, here we go. Okay. They're a game development company that focuses on tabletop games. Our flagship product, the Valor tabletop system, is a high-action role-playing experience that offers high levels of customization and excitement. Okay. Let's take a look here. Well, yeah. Maybe I'll take a look. That is fantastic. That's a true first look. A lot of times with first looks, it's a game system. I might even own the book. I just never opened it, or maybe something like that. But that is a huge amount of support, Arm and Anathema. I know I've seen you here in streams before, so thank you for this very generous offer. And, look, I try to support what you guys are all about. And since you technically are throwing that towards a first look, technically I should update the goal and change that out of Super Chat and put that into our tip goal, because that's what that actually was for. So that's actually what our thing looks like. And since both of our tip goals got filled, so Thursday we'll do GM skills number 4, and then Sunday sounds like we're going to be back and we're going to be talking about the Valor TTRPG, not just because Armored Anathema threw down $100, although that is awesome and sweet, and thank you, but because I'm very interested, if somebody cares that much about a game, to have it checked out, to take a look at it. And of course, we always like looking at first looks here. And like I said, most of the time I know about the game. I've heard of it. I own it. I know somebody who's played it. I just never looked at it. I know nothing about this game system at all. It's completely out of blue. So, will I be a shill for $100? Apparently so. But thank you. This all sounds good to me. I'm in. All right. Yeah. See. So we'll be back. We'll be back Tuesday for EverQuest, Knights in Exile. We'll be back Thursday for GM skills. And then we'll be back next Sunday for a first look at a game that I've never even heard of before. So that sounds like we have the whole week planned out. And in between all of that, we are going to be on our Discord. We're going to be a part of the Knights of Last Call, and we are going to be taking a look. We're going to be joining conversations. We're going to be playing games, running games. I think it's going to be a really, really great, awesome summer. We're hopefully getting close to launching NR Season 3. Again, it was supposed to launch the beginning of this month. Usually it launches end of April, early March or early May. Obviously, it's delayed. We've just all been very, very busy, myself and Aaron especially. Bob's been running some Dragonbane games, but Aaron and I have not had the opportunity to work on NR as much. So that is definitely part of our priority. And of course, next month we're going to be going to Origins. And then just as a kind of a quick aside, I just want to highlight. So, just this week, we've got, or just this month, I should say, so far, we have had, looks like 36 community games run in our Knights of Last Call community. These are official ones that got, put on the schedule, put on the calendar. But we started off the month with Blades in the Bakumatsu, which was part of our Golden Week. We had a game of Aliens. We had a game of Forged in the Dark, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a Mothership 1st Edition game, a 4th Edition section. Bob ran Legend of the Five Rings. We had a Traveler Fridays or Traveler Thursdays or whatever it is. We had Masks Mondays, if you're into the Masks game. We had a PBTA game, Armor Astur Advent, which is inspired by Mobile Suit Gundam, Dragonbane games, Ryutama games, High Level 4th Edition, Commander and Guardian playtest for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Fabula Ultima, 4E Dungeon Delve, Delta Green, Band of Blades, Goblin Slayer, Tomb Raider, more Fabula Ultima, Skate Wizards, Valraven, Hackmaster, more Legend of the Five Rings, more Dragonbane, Coriolis, the Great Dark. I'm skipping over half of these. So, just an incredible array of games are being put out every single day. Every single week we're just getting a ton of game out there. How much do I got to throw down for a Fate on Friday? Friday's when I play, John. That's not fair. We're tapped out, John, this week. Although I did see your message, John, about taking a look at that other thing. So I'll make sure to add it to the list and take a look at it and see if it's something that we want to do. You can push for it on poll days. Boothby says, I ran Alien, Dune, and of course some Pathfinder 2nd Edition that aren't on that schedule. Right. So I'm actually upset because I wish I wish everybody that was running games that are connected to Night's Last Call would use the schedule, only because it just keeps me appraised of all of the games that are actually occurring. And I think it's, that is the biggest source of pride I have with this community, is that we have built a community of 400 plus people, most of whom are game masters. They're running games. We're trying to find players, and they are running just a huge menagerie of just so many different types of games. I just find it so awesome and compelling. And someone like Boothby here, who's running Alien, Dune, and Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is just fantastic. And I would be remiss, Rick, if I did not mention the Traveler campaign. Exactly. So, when you have a game, a community where you are filling up Alien, Dune, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and then Traveler, right? Now, Traveler and Dune, they're both in space. They're very different game systems, though. And Alien is a year zero engine. So, Rick, definitely not forgetting about a Traveler. And of course, if you're interested in Traveler, go ahead and look in our live stream history and look for our VODs. You'll see that Rick and I covered Traveler. Rick and I spent a good amount of time talking about that system, if you're interested. And of course, there's Traveler games, Dune games, Alien games, Pathfinder 2nd Edition games, 4E D&D games. I honestly think the only system we're not running, and not because it's banned, like people could run it if they want to. I honestly think the only system that's not really getting run is 5th Edition D&D. But you know what? There's a million other places to play that, so I'm not too mad about that. And who knows? Once the 5.5, not 6th edition comes out, maybe we'll get some of that too. We got a new Fabula Ultima Techno using the high fantasy, or not the high fantasy, but the Techno Fantasy book that just released coming out. Wow, this is going to be so great. Universe at War using the Alien RPG and a Marine campaign. That's pretty sweet. An EU-friendly Fabula Ultima press start. Looks like that one's all filled up, though. That's happening here this week. We got Sidon running a game for 5 people. And it's just fantastic. Just incredible work from our incredible community. So thank you, Rick, for that support. And thank you to everybody. You guys really came out today and supported this channel, supported this stream. I definitely have a lot of thanks for that. So big shout out to Rick for that super chat. Armored Anathema for that absolutely generous, mind-boggling $100 super chat. We don't get many unless it involves making Derek upset and embarrassing him. We usually don't get tips that big, so I really appreciate it when we do. That's a lot of support, and I really appreciate it. Definitely feeling the love there. Super chats from John and Karama for $40 and $10, filling up those super chats, getting us so that we're going to keep talking about GM skills. And we also had tips from Lollipop and Tabletop Nerd Josh. Even though they were going for the tips, they were looking for more GM tip streams. Although Tabletop Josh would like to see us talk about Skate Wizards and Goblin Slayer TTRPG. So we got a lot of stuff. I honestly, if I could stream more, I would. We have so much to talk about. There's so much stuff. If I was one of these classic content creators who made one 15-minute video a week, I don't know how I would explode. There's too much to talk about. There's so many games. There's so many ideas. There's so many things. Like I stream, sometimes I stream 9 to 10 hours a week, and I feel like I don't even have enough time. And then I spend another 20 or 30 hours on the Discord talking about stuff, and it still feels like I don't have enough time. So it's a lot. Anyways, well, thanks everybody for joining me on this Sunday. I hope you have a great Memorial Day. If not, I hope you have a great week. We got a bunch of streams coming up, and it looks like we've got them pretty much set in stone. So you know what to expect from us. And of course, we'll be here. We'll be in our Discord. We'll be talking. We'll be chatting. And I look forward to seeing you all next time on Knights of Last Call. Oh, wait. We got one last one right before we go. Masks Monday mentioned $2. I mentioned Mask Monday. You'll do your best to be there next Sunday. Well, Armored Anathema, hopefully you are. I'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts. If not, you can always check the VOD. But again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for that support. That is very, very nice. And yet, Pepper, I did mention Masks because I love Magpie and I love Masks and I love what they did with the PBTA engine using that game system. It was revolutionary and it's a fantastic, fantastic thing. Plus, also, Young Justice is like one of the best cartoons of all time. So, Masks is my jam. All right, everybody. See you in the game on Tuesday. We'll be there, buddy. If you make a new character, Rich, you could probably just play with us. All right, everybody. I will talk to you next time Thank you, Pepper, for that last minute interruption as we were about to go out. And we'll see you on a last call. Good night, everybody. Take care.